Chapter 1370. After Su Ru left, Shao Qi and Shao Shi hurried over. They were dressed in white gowns and had a faint fragrance. The people from the Sword Moon sect are here? Shao Shi frowned. Chu Li nodded. Shao Qi asked, "Why are the disciples from the Sword Moon sect here?" "Nothing good." Shao Shi scoffed. "Chao Xian is dead. They suspect that I killed him." Chu Li smiled. "They want me to go to the Sword Moon sect to defend myself." Shao Qi stared at him. "You killed him, didn't you?" Chu Li smiled and nodded. Shao Qi sighed. Shao Shi smiled. "I should have killed him. But now that we've been discovered, what should we do?" Chu Li replied, "I didn't give myself away. The Sword Moon sect is very capable. We can't underestimate them." Shao Qi frowned. "I'm just afraid that they won't care if you're the murderer or not. They'll vent their anger on you. Then I'll run." Chu Li smiled. He said it so casually as if the Sword Moon sect was not a dangerous place. The two ladies were not fooled by his casual tone. They frowned and stared at him. They knew how powerful he was. Chu Li shook his head and smiled. "Unfortunately, they can't run away." He was not afraid of the Sword Moon sect. If he could not defeat them, he could run. However, if they attacked King An's imperial residence and the public house, he would not be able to do anything. No matter how strong he was, he could not protect every place. He was not too worried about King An's imperial residence. The Sword Moon sect's top-notch masters would not dare to come. The fairy's capital was guarded by enlightened masters. The public house was far away. If they were to be dealt with, he would not be able to protect them. Shao Shi scoffed. "Don't be silly. If you can't defeat them, run. As long as you run, they won't dare to do anything." Shao Qi nodded. "They won't dare to do anything because they have reservations. If you can't escape, they might just take care of the High Duke's public house and King An's imperial residence." Chu Li smiled. "Don't worry, the sky won't fall." He felt a wave of depression that was difficult to dispel, and he was abnormally sullen. "Enlightened master, I must become an enlightened master as soon as possible. If I can't become an enlightened master, I won't be able to live freely." His mind was boiling. He focused all his willpower on the path of becoming an enlightened master. He must obtain the dragon taming technique. His heart was in turmoil, but he still smiled calmly on the surface. "If it really doesn't work, we still have the 100,000 mountains." "That's true." Xiao Shi smiled and said, "Going to the 100,000 mountain is not bad. There's no trouble from the mortal world." Chu Li shook his head and laughed. Shao Qi stepped forward and held Chu Li's hand. She said softly, "Don't be too hard on yourself. If you want to fight, just fight." She knew Chu Li's character very well. He was soft on the outside but tough on the inside. He seemed modest but he was arrogant and could not tolerate anyone offending him. He might seem to be a servant in the High Duke's public house and the imperial residence, but he was above everyone else and had great authority. However, when he came to the Sword Moon sect, he became the one being bullied. How could he stand it? She did not want Chu Li to endure the humiliation and compromise. Chu Li smiled and nodded. He suddenly frowned. "Is there a new guard in the prince's mansion?" Shao Qi and Shao Shi looked at each other and shook their heads. They usually did not care so much. Chu Li said, "There are two new faces. They're disciples of the Holy Church of Light." "The Holy Church of Light?" The two women frowned. Chu Li scoffed. "It seems like the Holy Church of Light has heard about me." It seemed like Sun Mingyue heard about him and wanted to know if he was dead or not. However, he was not worried. After the last empowerment, she would not suspect him anymore. Shao Shi frowned. "Why don't we just keep them?" Chu Li shook his head. "They're too dangerous. We'll find an excuse to chase them out of the residence. They should understand. Although the disciples of the Holy Church of Light were domineering in the Li dynasty, they would not risk their lives. The disciples who came to the Ji dynasty were usually fugitives. They were prepared to sacrifice themselves for the great light surpassing state. Okay. Xiao Shi said, we'll chase them out tomorrow. Early in the morning, Chu Li left King An's imperial residence under the bright sun. He left Fairy's capital and headed toward the Fu dynasty. After walking for 100 miles, he stopped beside a forest and turned his head. Lu Yurong was already standing on the treetop. She wore a white veil that covered her face. Only her watery eyes were exposed. They were full of colors when she looked around. When Lu Yurong saw him looking over, she floated down and landed in front of him. Are you really going to the Sword Moon sect? Chu Li nodded. I have to go. The situation is pressing. Lu Yurong frowned and did not say anything. Chu Li looked at her and did not say anything. Sigh. Lu Yurong sighed. The Ji dynasty and the Fu dynasty are indeed pressing. If it were you, Miss Lu, what would you do? I won't go. Chu Li smiled and nodded. He closed fist saluted and turned to leave. Lu Yurong quickly said, the Sword Moon sect is extreme. This trip bodes ill for you. Chu Li said, I'll have to try. They won't give you a chance to explain. They'll kill you right away. Lu Yurong scoffed. This is how they do things. They send people to their deaths to show off their power. Chu Li frowned. His mind was always on Goddess Attraction Mountain, Stargazing Pavilion, and the Church of the Divine Blood. Although the Sword Moon sect was strong, they only had one encounter. He did not get entangled with them and did not know them well. That's why you better be prepared for a massacre, Lu Yurong said. In my opinion, we don't have to care about them. If they dare to come, we'll just kill them. It's easier in our territory. Chu Li smiled. All the more reason to go and take a look. He had God's limbs and the divine void light technique. Even if there were treasures to restrain him, he still had Mahavairokkana's immobility scripture to counter him. Therefore, he was not worried about not being able to escape. Since he could escape, it did not matter where he was. He felt a sense of heroism. So what if it was the Sword Moon sect? He had to charge in and destroy their power. Lu Yurong furrowed her brows and stared into his eyes. She saw that his gaze was clear and he was in high spirits. She sighed and said, although your martial arts is strong and you can do whatever you want in the Ji dynasty, that is the Fu dynasty. So what if it's the Fu dynasty? Chu Li shook his head. I'd like to see what the Sword Moon sect is capable of. All right. Lu Yurong sighed. Be careful. I don't want to lose you as an opponent. Don't worry. Chu Li closed fist saluted and strode away. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared from Lu Yurong's sight. Lu Yurong frowned and pondered. In the end, she shook her head and sighed. Chu Li used his light body technique to travel quickly. Along the way, he began to integrate the martial arts he had learned. His sword technique was almost integrated. He was ready to integrate his fist technique and palm technique into one. It could be a fist, a palm, or a claw. He could change it at will, regardless of the technique. He had learned many things. Sometimes, he would even forget which antique study to use in a battle. There were too many choices. Learning too many things would be useless. Only by integrating them into one could one be considered his own skill. 3 days later, in the morning, he arrived at the foot of the Sword Moon Peak of the Fu dynasty's Sword Moon sect. The Sword Moon Peak was a strangely shaped mountain. At first glance, it looked like a crescent moon. Under the sun, it looked like a scimitar. When he arrived at the foot of the mountain, 2 young men in purple robes were guarding the mountain gate. When they saw Chu Li, they stepped forward to block his way and looked at him calmly. Chu Li told them his name. The 2 men looked at him and shook their heads. One of them went to report while the other closed his eyes and stood still. He could not be bothered with Chu Li. Chapter 1371. After a while, the person who went to report came down and fist saluted. Chief Chu, please go up the mountain. Chu Li fist saluted. Thank you. The other young man in purple opened his eyes and fist saluted. He then closed his eyes and said nothing. The two purple-robed young men were well-mannered and did not make a faux pas, but Chu Li could tell that they did not value him. Instead, they looked down on him. They did not spare him a glance and did not even bother to talk to him. They treated him like a dead man who would not be able to leave the Sword Moon sect alive. Chu Li frowned. It seemed that the Sword Moon sect was really overbearing. He had seen many of the 8 major sects in the Fu dynasty. Most of them were overbearing and overbearing. There were very few sects like the Plain Maiden Palace. They were all proud and looked down on others. Seeing that Chu Li did not move, the young man in purple said, "Chief Chu, follow this path up the mountain. Someone will receive you." "Thank you." Chu Li fist saluted and slowly walked up the stone step. The stone steps led to the top of the mountain and the end could not be seen. Every stone step was made of bluestone. After years of vicissitudes and polishing, the sides were covered in moss while the front was polished to the point that one could see one's reflection. Seeing that Chu Li's figure was getting further away, the young man in purple opened his eyes and shook his head. "Another one who wants to die. It can't be helped. He's junior brother Chow's enemy. What a pity. There's nothing to pity about. There are so many people like him who died in the mountain. It's a pity that he wasn't born in the Fu dynasty. If he was born in the Fu dynasty, he's probably already a disciple of the Sword Moon sect. It's rare to have such a cultivation level in the wilderness of the Ji dynasty. It can't be helped that he's unlucky." "Who's in charge of killing him?" the young man in purple asked. "Senior brother Nian." The other young man in purple said, "With senior brother Nian, we'll definitely succeed. It's useless no matter how powerful he is. Actually, senior brother one should be the one doing it. It's safer. I don't think this guy is easy to deal with. Senior brother one is in isolated cultivation. He was agitated when he met the guy from the Holy Church of Light." "The Holy Church of Light. I heard there's a powerful guy, Zhao Dai. He's close to the stargazing pavilion. I wonder what they're up to. They've always been unpredictable. But to be able to force senior brother one into isolated cultivation, he's really something. If senior brother one makes a move, there won't be any mistakes. I think senior brother Nian is enough." Although Chu Li had walked far away, he could clearly see what was going on in their mind. He shook his head. It seemed like they really did not want to give him a way out. In that case, he could go all out and barge into the Sword Moon sect and kill everyone there. After walking for more than 1,000 steps, a small pavilion appeared beside him. It had overhanging eaves and hanging corners, giving it an antique feel. There was a stone table in the pavilion, and a handsome young man sat beside it. His purple clothes fluttered in the wind, causing his face to seem like jade. His lips were red, his teeth were white, and his eyes were like cold stars. The young man was sipping a cup of tea and looking at him with a smile. Chu Li arrived at the gazebo and sat across the stone table. The handsome young man smiled and said, "I'm Nian Feng, a disciple of the Sword Moon sect. You must be Chu Li, right?" "That's me." Chu Li nodded. "Are you here to kill me?" "That's right." Nian Feng nodded slightly. "The sect's orders must be obeyed. I hope Brother Chu won't blame me." "Hee hee." Chu Li laughed. "That's what I wanted to say too. You wanted to kill me, so it's only right for me to kill you." "How arrogant. I like it." Nian Feng laughed and put down his teacup. He stood up and drew his sword. "Junior brother Chow died in your hands. We'll naturally avenge him. Whether Chow Xian died in my hands or not, you'll still want to kill me. Why bother finding excuses?" Chu Li shook his head. "But you'll die in my hands." Swoosh! Nian Feng's figure suddenly blurred, as if he had turned into a shadow. A ray of light from his sword had already pierced Chu Li's chest. Ding! The tip of Chu Li's sword was already in front of his chest. Nian Feng's sword shook involuntarily, and his body stiffened. He felt a strange force coming from his sword, and his body instantly went numb and uncontrollable. He could only watch as the tip of Chu Li's sword pierced his throat. The sword force entered his brain from his throat. His vision instantly darkened, and he died in an instant. He could not be any more dead. Chu Li slowly drew his sword out of its scabbard and glanced 100 meters above the steps. There were 2 young men in purple robes there. Initially, they were going to deal with his corpse, but now they were going to deal with Nianfeng's corpse. Nianfeng was also a rising star in the Sword Moon sect. He was second only to Wen Tingdao among the younger generation of disciples. Everyone thought that he would definitely be able to kill Chu Li. Senior brother Nian. The 2 of them instantly widened their eyes as they screamed. Chu Li calmly looked at them and continued to walk up the step. The 2 of them turned around and ran. Their figures blurred for a moment before disappearing. Their body movement technique was extremely fast. Chu Li went up another 500 steps and arrived at another pagoda. A middle-aged man in purple robes sat by the stone table in the pagoda. He looked ordinary and would not be noticed if he stood in the crowd. His eyes were shooting cold lightning as he glared at Chu Li as if he was trying to see through him. When he saw Chu Li step into the pagoda, he opened his mouth to speak. Chu Li waved his hand to cut him off. There's no need to say anything. Just do it. The middle-aged man in purple held his breath. Instead of venting his anger, he became even more enraged. His eyes began to turn red as blood vessels quickly filled his eyes. The cold lightning that shot out from his eyes seemed to pierce Chu Li. Chu Li slowly drew his sword. There's no need to tell me your name. I never remember the names of dead people. You're courting death. The middle-aged man in purple gritted his teeth. Then, a cold lightning suddenly appeared behind Chu Li, and the tip of the sword was about to reach his body. Ding! Chu Li's sword was unknowingly placed behind his back. The vibrating blade of the sword bounced off the body of the middle-aged man in purple and let out a clear sound. The middle-aged man in purple suddenly froze. His expression changed as he desperately channeled his inner energy. When Chu Li's sword was about to reach his throat, he regained control of his body. Just as he was about to dodge, an invisible finger force struck him and his body froze again. Chu Li stabbed with his sword again and used the petrifying finger. TSS. The tip of Chu Li's sword pierced through his throat. The gray tip of the sword appeared behind his head, and there was not a single drop of blood on the blade. The strange sword force crushed his brain, and he died in an instant. Chu Li slowly drew his sword and looked up at the 2 young men 100 meters away. He shook his head. Senior brother Song. The 2 men were shocked and furious. They turned around and ran. Chu Li smiled. His cultivation level was not the same as before. Although he could not run amok in the Fu dynasty, he was not far from it. He would be fine as long as he did not run into people like Wei Wuwei. Among the 8 major sects of the Fu dynasty, there were only 4 or 5 people like Wei Wuwei. Although this senior brother Song and Nianfeng were masters of the sect, they were far weaker than Wei Wuwei. In front of Chu Li, they were no different from children. Chu Li killed them as easily as cutting melons and vegetables. He continued to go up. After 100 steps, an old man with white eyebrows and beard floated down from the top of the stairs. He wore a purple robe and his face was pale as if he was injured. He was as thin as a skeleton and stared at Chu Li with his green, wolf-like eyes. Chu Li stopped and looked at the old man. Young man, you killed Nianfeng and Song Jiqing. The old man in purple robe let out a hoarse and unpleasant voice. Chu Li said calmly, yes. Then you shall die too. The old man's loose robe fluttered in the wind. The long sword at his waist slowly stabbed towards Chu Li. His movements were slow and his moves were simple. Chapter 1372. A cattail hassock was placed in a majestic basilica. A tall elder sat on the cattail hassock, sitting there like a mountain. His eyebrows were all white, his long eyebrows drooped to the corner of his mouth, connecting with his beard. His face was as red as a baby's. Hurried footsteps were heard. He slowly opened his eyes and glared at the middle-aged man who pushed open the basilica door and entered. The middle-aged man was dressed in purple and had a jade-like face. His brows were tightly knitted as he walked over and cupped his fists. "Elder, that brat is very tough. He killed Nian Feng and Song Jiqing and is currently fighting with senior brother Jin Siquang." "Xiao Jin?" the elder asked slowly. "Chu Li is not to be underestimated. How can we let him continue to show off?" The middle-aged man in purple shook his head. "If we can't kill him this time, we'll be too ashamed. The Ji dynasty has such a character. Every dog has its day. Looks like the Ji dynasty is going to prosper." The elder shook his head. "That's why we have to kill him. If we let him grow, it'll be troublesome." The elder nodded in satisfaction. "We won't fail this time, right? Senior Jin has 200 years of cultivation. No matter how powerful Chu Li is, he won't be able to stop him." "That's good. I hope there won't be any more accidents." The elder smiled. "Don't worry, elder. Senior Jin may seem violent, but he's actually very meticulous. He won't fail miserably. Just listen to the good news." The elder nodded. "You're right to be careful." "Yes." The man in purple sighed. Chu Li was only in his 20s. Their previous arrangement was for a master in his 30s to kill him. They felt that this was the most appropriate method. Not only would they be able to kill Chu Li, but they would also let the disciples know how powerful Chu Li was. This would prevent them from becoming arrogant and thinking that there was not a single master in a remote place like the Ji dynasty. Unfortunately, he underestimated that kid. He did not expect Nian Feng to kill him instead of Chu Li. Later on, he sent a master for 60 years but to no avail. He did not want to hurt the disciples' confidence, so he sent a 200-year-old master, his own senior, Jin Siquang. He wanted to kill him in one fell swoop and not give Chu Li any chance. However, it was a major event for experts over 100 years old to make a move. Even within the sect, experts over 100 years old would not easily make a move. He was worried that the elder would make a fuss over nothing and act rashly, so he came to explain. The sound of hurried footsteps could be heard. A purple-robed youth was standing outside the hall. The purple-robed middle-aged man frowned. "What is it?" "Masters Junior Liu, that Chu Li won again." The purple-robed young man cupped his fists and said carefully. He lowered his head, not daring to look into the hall. This was Marshal Granduncle's seclusion hall, and disciples were forbidden from approaching. However, Marshal Uncle had already arrived, and in order to pass on the news, he could only come over to report. This matter was really too urgent and could not be delayed. "Your Marshal Uncle Jin lost?" the purple-robed middle-aged man asked in a low voice. "Marshal Uncle Jin is already dead." "Nonsense." "Yes." The purple-robed young man hurriedly bowed, not daring to say another word. How could Chu Li possibly kill Brother Jin? The purple-robed middle-aged man shouted in disbelief. The purple-robed youth said nothing. The old man with white eyebrows and beard said in a deep voice, "Interesting. We've underestimated this young man. If he's really a genius, then all the more reason to kill him. Otherwise, we'll be harmed instead, and there will be endless troubles in the future." "Yes." The purple-robed middle-aged man's face was gloomy, and he cupped his fists. "Elder, I'll do it myself." "No, I'll do it myself." The old man with white eyebrows and beard slowly stood up. "Elder." The purple-robed middle-aged man was shocked. "You'll do it?" "That's right." The old man nodded. "You can defeat Xiao Jin, and he can defeat Xiao Jin too. Are you confident that you can kill him?" The purple-robed middle-aged man was silent, and finally, he shook his head and sighed. He was considered a genius of his generation. Other than junior brother Duan, who was in seclusion, he was the strongest. However, compared to the martial uncles in the sect, who were almost 300 years old, he was still a notch lower. Masters Junior Ching was far better than him. The martial arts of the Sword Moon sect and the Church of the Divine Blood were different. Other than inner power, swordsmanship was more important. Grandmasters did not necessarily have strong inner energy just because they were older. Every grandmaster had their own limit. Their bodies were like bottles, and everyone was a bottle of different sizes. Most of the time, they would reach their limits after they were over 100 years old. Some of them were around 200 years old. After that, they would need to calm down and pursue purity in order to break through their limit. Swordsmanship was different from inner energy cultivation. There was no end to it, and the more one was trained, the more powerful it would be. Therefore, it was difficult for a disciple of the Sword Moon sect to be as talented as Wei Wuwei, who was able to suppress the elders at such a young age. Although Masters Junior Cheng's swordsmanship was not the best in the sect, it was already in the top 10. No matter how powerful Chu Li was, he would not be able to escape. Ching Hui slowly said, "Let's go." "Elder, are you really going to do it?" The purple-robed middle-aged man sighed. "You're giving him too much credit. If we don't give him some credit, who knows how many disciples will suffer." Ching Hui shook his head and slowly walked out of the basilica. Outside, the purple-robed young man was standing with his head lowered, motionless like a statue. Ching Hui took a step forward and suddenly disappeared. The purple-robed middle-aged man said in a deep voice, "Go and collect your master's Junior Jin's corpse and settle it properly." "Yes," the purple-robed young man hurriedly said. The purple-robed middle-aged man left like a stream of light and disappeared in an instant. When he came to a pagoda, Chu Li and Ching Hui were already fighting. The sword light was like lightning, shrouding the two of them. He squinted his eyes and sized up Chu Li, his expression becoming more and more unpleasant. Chu Li's swordsmanship did not seem fast, and every sword move was clear, but it was slow against fast. No matter how fast Ching Hui was, who was as fast as lightning and every move was fatal, Chu Li was still able to steadily defend himself and was not restrained at all. In terms of swordsmanship, the two of them were actually evenly matched, and Chu Li was not at a disadvantage at all. If he went up, he would definitely not be Chu Li's opponent. How did Chu Li have such a profound swordsmanship at such a young age? Chu Li swung his sword calmly, and his expression was calm. He had never felt so wonderful before. Under Ching Hui's pressure, all of his swordsmanship gradually merged, and he was able to easily execute all of his moves. Every sword move looked ordinary, but it was ingenious and unusually exquisite, and it was just enough to restrain Ching Hui's lightning-like sword light. This Ching Hui was extremely powerful. His inner energy was rich and endless, and the sword force filled the air, making him feel like he was in an ocean of sword force, and it was everywhere and impossible to defend against. Chu Li, on the other hand, was skillfully breaking through the force, and the heart technique of his swordsmanship kept changing, whether it was the divine light technique, cloud slashing power, earth matrix and reincarnation scripture, or even the heavenly demonic power. Under such changes, the layers of sword force were messed up, and it was no longer a threat to him. Chu Li's sword attacks gradually sped up, and the effects of the wind speed pill began to show. His sword attacks were much faster than ordinary people. The two of them fought faster, and the sword light increased, forming a cold shroud around them. They were purely competing with fast swordsmanship. Ching Hui focused his spirit, and there was no other thought in his mind except to be faster, 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 and faster. "Here!" Chu Li shouted, and suddenly, a blade shot out from his left hand. The distance was extremely close, and the speed was so fast that it was impossible to defend against it. Ding! Ching Hui hurriedly swung his sword to block it. Chapter 1373. Stop! The middle-aged man in purple roared. Before he could finish, Chu Li had already pulled his sword back. Ching Hui's eyes widened in disbelief. He stared at Chu Li with hatred. That attack was indeed strange. It was not a pure swordsmanship but a trick played by the young man. He had failed miserably. The middle-aged man in purple roared and rushed toward Chu Li. Chu Li looked at Ching Hui in shock. He was indeed an old man. He was so tenacious. He could withstand the sword force attacking his brain. It seemed like he would not die. His sword flashed and stabbed between his brows again. The middle-aged man's sword had arrived. Ding, 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 ding. He stood in front of Ching Hui and desperately waved his sword to block Chu Li so that he could not kill him a second time. Chu Li shook his head and waved his left hand. A cold light shot through Ching Hui. "You!" The middle-aged man in purple roared angrily. "You deserve to die." Chu Li sneered. "I don't know if I deserve to die, but all of you deserve to die. Since you want to kill me, be prepared to be killed by me." "Chu Li, just you wait." The purple-robed middle-aged man gritted his teeth and glared at Chu Li. His sword gleamed brightly like thousands of pear-blossoming trees, completely enveloping Chu Li. His cold voice rang, "You must die, your woman and your family must die. The Sword Moon sect will definitely destroy the public house." Chu Li waved his sword like lightning and blocked the sword flashed. He sneered. "Let's see what you're capable of. This is the Sword Moon sect's face. If you surrender, I can spare the public house and your woman," the middle-aged man in purple said coldly. Chu Li laughed. Even a 3-year-old wouldn't believe this. The Sword Moon sect is just SOSO. Purple shadows flashed, and more than 100 Sword Moon sect disciples surrounded the gazebo, glaring at him fiercely. Someone went to visit Ching Hui, but unfortunately, Ching Hui was already dead. "Elder Cheng is dead," the disciples shouted in grief. Everyone glared at Chu Li with anger as if they wanted to tear him apart. Everyone attacked together. "Disciples under 100 years, step back!" The middle-aged man in purple roared. More than 10 middle-aged men shot into the sword light and stabbed at Chu Li with their swords. Their bodies flickered in an unpredictable manner. They cooperated well with each other, each sword aimed at a different part of Chu Li's body, not giving him a chance to dodge. Ding, 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 ding. Chu Li's figure was nowhere to be seen. Only the dusky sword gleam shrouded the surroundings, colliding with the sword gleams one after another, producing a rapid and continuous clear sound with a strange rhythm. Chu Li felt the pressure on him increase greatly. He could not fight them head-on. These 100-year-old masters were not mediocre, and their swordsmanship was refined. He could handle a few of them, but it would be difficult for him to handle more than 10 of them. Moreover, they had already formed a sword formation with great teamwork. "I'm leaving." Chu Li laughed out loud and suddenly disappeared. The next moment, he appeared outside the sword formation. "Where do you think you're going?" The purple-robed middle-aged man shouted. "Kill him no matter what." Everyone chased after him relentlessly. Chu Li's body moved swiftly as he exited the stone staircase and headed to the side. "Under the formation, don't even think about escaping." The purple-robed middle-aged man raised his voice and shouted, "Surrender now." Chu Li raised his voice and laughed. "You want me to surrender with your abilities? Ha! Let's see how you can escape. I'll naturally get out after I kill all of you." How arrogant! No one has been able to do that for thousands of years. "Then I'll be the first." Chu Li laughed as he dodged, not letting the sword formation surround him. Swoosh! His sword gleam pierced through the throat of one of them. The sword force instantly surged to the brain and killed him. When he pulled out his sword, he was surrounded by 7 people again. The sword formation was activated again, and this time, the pressure was immense. All 7 of them had cast their secret skills, and their bodies moved like lightning. The sword gleam was erratic, and it was difficult to distinguish which was real and which was fake. For a moment, he was flustered. Swoosh! His left shoulder was suddenly hit by a sword. However, the tip of the sword slid away. With his inner armor and the sentient menace to protect his body, he managed to deflect the sword. The faces of the 7 people darkened, and the sword gleam increased in intensity. They did not care about their own energy consumption. Even if it meant risking their lives, they had to kill Chuli. Chuli was trapped by them and could not escape for a moment. He did not even have the time to cast God's limbs and divine void light. Swoosh! Swoosh! Chuli suddenly stabbed one of them in the chest, and his shoulder was hit as well. This time, the tip of the opponent's sword pierced his shoulder, and fresh blood gushed out. Chuli smiled. The sword formation of the 7 people was instantly broken. It was worth it to be hit by a sword. The remaining 6 people formed another sword formation and trapped him again. Chuli's face darkened. The Sword Moon Sect was indeed the Sword Moon Sect. They were not to be underestimated. The pressure that the 6 people gave him was still immense. Moreover, the 6 of them did not care about their own safety and attacked him like crazy. They did not care about his sword, and they wanted to destroy everything. Ding 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 ding. Amidst the clear sounds, more than 10 Sword Moon Sect disciples surrounded him. They were all masters above 100 years old. Under the observation of the omniscient mirror, he realized that more masters were rushing over. Masters above 100 years old were living in seclusion in the distance, and they were rushing over when they heard the news. If this continued, he would be killed no matter how powerful he was. He scoffed and said, "Let's stop here for today. See you again." He suddenly disappeared on the spot, and the tip of his sword was hit again. He activated the Great Void Light technique to cross the void and appeared 100 meters away. Then, he disappeared again before the others could catch up. Chase after him. With the formation, he can't escape. The purple-robed middle-aged man shouted. Everyone immediately split into groups of 6 and searched in different directions. Although there was a formation, Chuli used the Deva shedding technique to leave. He stood at the peak of another mountain and looked at the Sword Moon Peak from afar. He roared into the sky and laughed loudly. His laughter shook the sky, and the entire Sword Moon Peak could hear it. He stood at the peak and laughed loudly. He felt extremely happy, unprecedentedly happy. So what if it was the Sword Moon Sect? He would kill when he needed to, and he had no fear. He suddenly stopped laughing and sat down with his legs crossed. He took out the Star Stone and began to activate the Heavenly Heart technique. Bright lights flashed in front of him and turned into balls of bright light. It was like the moon reflected in a lake. After a while, the light gradually condensed, and the moon in the lake turned into a bright moon in the sky. Boom! With the sound of thunder, he suddenly woke up and opened his eyes. Heaven and earth became bright and transparent. When he looked up at the sky, it was as if it was right in front of him, and he could touch it with his hand. When he looked down at the ground under his feet had become one. He was the ground, and the ground was him. The 10th level of the Heavenly Heart technique had arrived. He saw dozens of purple figures flashing and approaching. They were about to arrive here. He let out another loud laugh, and then disappeared without a trace. More than 10 purple figures appeared at the peak and looked around. They were extremely angry. The purple-robed middle-aged man gritted his teeth and glanced around. Finally, he sneered, where can he run to? Go to the G Dynasty and destroy the E-Public House. Destroy the E-Public House. Everyone responded loudly. Chapter 1374. The night was dark and the moonlight shone like water. About 15 miles away from Chongming Town, 20 middle-aged men in purple robes slowly drifted into a pine forest. They were like 20 shadows, their footsteps were soundless, and they drifted into the town like ghosts. Although they were not even 100 years old, their cultivation level was higher than the average 100-year-old master. The group sat in a circle on an open space. The moonlight shone through the branches and their bodies were covered in mottled shadows. Brother Lu, should we attack Chongming Town and attack the High Duke's public house? Someone asked softly. Yes. The middle-aged man in purple robes, Lu Wuji, who was sitting in the middle, nodded slowly and scoffed. There's no need for any tricks or schemes. We'll just destroy them. Because of Chu Li, the public house's strength has improved tremendously in recent years. We have to be careful. When Chu Li returns, it's inevitable that he'll gather some masters to help, someone said softly. Lu Wuji sneered. What's there to be cautious about? Not everyone is Chu Li. That's true. Someone nodded and smiled. Unless he asks the masters from the Tempest Temple. However, I heard that the Tempest Temple doesn't have a good relationship with Chu Li. They won't help him. I'm guessing that he's hiding in Fairy's capital now that he knows that we're after him. He's certain that we won't dare to go to Fairy's capital. The group remained silent. Although they were powerful, they really did not want to go to Fairy's capital to kill people. The Fu dynasty was extremely powerful and looked down on the Ji dynasty. However, the enlightened masters were an exception. The grandmasters from any country were no match for the enlightened masters. Fairy's capital was guarded by the enlightened masters. They could go to Fairy's capital, but they could not kill people there. Otherwise, the enlightened masters would not show mercy just because they were from the Fu dynasty's martial arts world. Let's see if he still comes after we destroy the public house. Lu Wuji sneered. If he's really a cold-blooded and heartless person, we'll admit defeat. Another scoffed. He'll stay in Fairy's capital for the rest of his life. He'll become a useless person. If that's the case, there's nothing we can do. Lu Wuji frowned. A rugged middle-aged man scoffed. Brother Lu, if that's the case, I'll bring a group of people to Fairy's capital and kill him no matter what. Yes. Even if we die, we have to kill him. Someone nodded in agreement. Count me in when the time comes. I don't think there's a need for us. Elder Chun and the others will take action. Some of the elders in the sect had reached the end of their lifespans and were barely holding on. They would soon ascend to the Grandmaster's boundary, and these people would naturally deal with Chu Li, even if they were killed by an enlightened master in the Fairy's capital. It doesn't matter if we kill Chu Li or not, we must destroy the public house first. Lu Wuji said in a low voice. Our disciples can't die in vain. We must bury the public house with them. Senior Brother Lu, are we going to kill everyone after we enter? That's right, no one will be spared. Lu Wuji said coldly. We won't even let a 3-year-old go. We must let the world know the consequences of provoking the Sword Moon sect. We must let the people of the Ji dynasty fear us even more. Yes. Everyone replied in a deep voice. They had long passed the age of being hot-blooded and pure. There was no such thing as justice, only the benefits of the sect. As long as it was for the sect, they would not hesitate to commit murder or arson. Those who offended the sect, no matter how righteous they were, had to be killed. What a vicious heart! Suddenly, a cold laugh rang out. Who is it? Everyone hurriedly stood up and pressed their swords against each other. Chu Li! Lu Wuji shouted. How dare you come? Chu Li's voice seemed to come from all directions. This will be the place where all of you will die. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone felt the scene in front of them suddenly change. It was no longer a forest, but a mountain peak. It was as if they were standing on top of the mountain peak. Their surroundings were empty and there were only deep valleys. Everywhere they looked, there were mountains and dense forests. Oh no, it's a formation! Everyone exclaimed. They knew the power of a formation the best. What was even more strange was how did Chu Li manage to set up a formation without them knowing? They were not deaf or blind. If Chu Li really came close, they would definitely be able to sense it. Be careful, he won't dare to come over, Lu Wuji said in a deep voice. Although he said that, his heart sank. He did not expect to be ambushed by Chu Li. For a grandmaster, this was really unusual. Logically, if there was an ambush here, They would definitely have a sense of danger and avoid it in advance. Chu Li's ability to hide from their instincts was the scariest and the most threatening. Chu Li's voice was heard again. If you can't break the formation, then starve to death. Forgive me for not keeping you company. Goodbye. Chu Li. Lu Wuji shouted. We're not the only ones in the Sword Moon sect. If we die, more powerful masters will come and you'll die a worse death. Chu Li's laughter reached their ears. It was as if they could see a mocking smile on Chu Li's face. Then I'll wait and see if your masters are more powerful or my formation is more powerful. No matter how powerful your formation is, it's still dead. That might not be true. Why don't you surrender? Lu Wuji said coldly. As long as you die, we won't pursue this matter. Chu Li laughed. It's better if I don't say such a ridiculous thing. Very well, you still have another option, Lu Wuji said. You can join the Sword Moon sect and become a disciple. Chu Li said, I'm not worthy of the Sword Moon sect. Goodbye. Don't you want to experience the profound martial arts of the Sword Moon sect? Lu Wuji quickly asked. Chu Li said, if the Sword Moon sect's martial arts were really profound, I wouldn't have beaten them so badly. It's nothing more than that. It's fine if I don't experience it. That's because our disciples are unworthy and failed to master the Sword Moon sect's martial arts. Lu Wuji scoffed. The martial arts of the Ji dynasty is a level lower than the Fu dynasties. Although you're strong, you're not the best in the Ji dynasty, right? Don't worry about it. Goodbye. Chu Li's voice was faint and faint before it finally disappeared. Everyone looked at Lu Wuji in confusion. They did not know why he changed his mind to recruit Chu Li. Lu Wuji shook his head with a solemn expression. Senior brother Lu, let's just break the formation. A rugged middle-aged man scoffed. It's just a formation. Luckily, senior brother Lu was careful and brought the formation-breaking talisman. Another man smiled and shook his head. However, the power of the formation-breaking talisman is limited. I don't know if it can break this formation. The formation-breaking talisman could break some small formations, but it was useless against medium and large formations. How strong can a formation set up by him alone be? The rugged middle-aged man scoffed. Lu Wuji took out a blood-red jade pendant and sighed. This formation-breaking talisman was not an ordinary treasure. It was a rare treasure that was refined by the Great One Palace. The Sword Moon sect paid a huge price to obtain it, and there were only 5 of them in the sect. They originally planned to use it to break the public house's formation, but they did not expect to use it here. The rugged middle-aged man saw his reluctance and scoffed. Senior brother Lu, as long as we break the formation, we can go to the public house and kill them. There are still many treasures in the public house, enough to make up for this formation-breaking talisman. That's right, let's break the formation. Everyone nodded. Sigh. Then let's break the formation. Lu Wuji sighed and tossed the crimson formation-breaking talisman into the air. Then, he pricked his index finger with the tip of his sword and dropped a drop of blood on the talisman. Chapter 1375. The droplets of blood shot onto the talisman like water droplets falling into a drought, instantly disappearing. The talisman suddenly emitted a bright red light, as if the sun had fallen in front of them. Everyone felt their eyes hurt and involuntarily closed them. When they opened their eyes again, the talisman had already disappeared. The red light spread and formed a huge sphere that enveloped everyone. The sphere was about 100 meters in diameter and seemed to be fighting against an invisible force. The red light kept flashing as if it had a life of its own. Everyone was on tenterhooks. It seemed like it would not be easy to break this formation. The red light was fighting against the power of the formation. If the red light was defeated, the formation would not be broken. Pop! There was a strange sound, and everyone felt their vision clear. Instantly, the scenery changed, and they returned to the pine forest. They immediately sighed in relief. knowing that the formation had been broken. "Senior brother Lu, let's go." Lu Wuji shook his head. No matter how Chu Li knew that they would be here and set up an ambush, this was currently the safest place. The formation had just been broken, so it was impossible for him to set up another formation. He glanced at everyone and saw that their faces were gloomy and somewhat shocked. They wanted to run away. "Ha ha!" Lu Wuji laughed twice and shook his head. "Formation or not, everything is useless against the formation-breaking talisman. If you have the guts, set up another formation." Setting up a formation could not be done in one go. It would take some time. Even the simplest formation would take half a day to set up. Lu Wuji knew that their morale was low, so he needed to boost everyone's courage. The place where they were at must have been set up beforehand, waiting for them to enter. It was scary to think about it. First of all, they did not sense any danger, which meant that there was a treasure that blinded their instincts. Moreover, how could they coincidentally enter this place? Chu Li had set up a formation beforehand, so he could not have predicted that they would come here to rest, right? They would never have a traitor, so how did he do it? This was the scariest part. "Ha ha!" Chu Li's laughter came from all directions again. He laughed loudly. "I'd like to see how many formation-breaking talismans you have." As soon as he finished speaking, the scenery in front of everyone changed again. It was as if they were in a sea of bamboos. The surrounding bamboos swayed gently, and when a gust of wind blew, it was like a green sea. As far as the eye could see, there was no end to it. No one knew where to go or when they would be able to walk out of it. "Surnamed Chu, you're just relying on formations," someone shouted. Chu Li's voice rang out faintly, as if it was coming from the clouds. "We'll talk after you've broken this formation." "Chu Li, don't be too pleased with yourself." Lu Wuji saw the gloomy expressions on everyone's faces and knew that they had lost their spirit. He took a deep breath and loudly said, "Did you think we were the only ones who came all the way here? To tell you the truth, this time, we've split into 3 groups to deal with your public house. You've only stopped one of our group. I'm guessing that by now, they've already rushed into the public house. There aren't many people left in the public house." Chu Li's voice was filled with joy. "Thank you for telling me, but you don't have to worry about this. They're trapped in the formation just like you guys." "Impossible!" Lu Wuji shouted. Chu Li laughed out loud. "One of them was you guys, another one was a yellow-faced shorty, and the third one was a fat old man, right?" Lu Wuji's expression was as dark as steel. He took a deep breath and said nothing else. The people around them did not look too good either. They knew that Chu Li was right. Since he knew, he was still calm and composed. The other 2 groups of people might really be intercepted by him. Chu Li said, "It's a pity that they didn't have a formation-breaking talisman. They couldn't even break a single formation. It's really a pity. We've prepared 3 sets of formations for them." 3 sets? Lu Wuji laughed coldly. "You're bragging too much." Chu Li laughed out loud. "What's there to brag about? You'll know once you try. It's a pity that you don't have a formation-breaking talisman anymore. You can only stay here obediently." As soon as he finished speaking, Lu Wuji heard a muffled groan. He turned his head and saw a figure flashing past like a ghost. His 2 junior brothers had already fallen to the ground. They were holding their throats with their eyes wide open. "Junior brother Leng! Junior brother Huang!" Lu Wuji shouted angrily. "Surnamed Chu, you're despicable." Chu Li's laughter could be heard from all directions. "It's not despicable for the Sword Moon sect to sneak up on the High Duke's public house, but it's despicable for me to sneak up on you. Is reason on your side? Do you think that once the Sword Moon sect shows up, everyone will submit to you and wait for you to kill them? How naive." As soon as he finished speaking, he flashed again and turned into a phantom that swept past everyone's eyes. Another 2 middle-aged men fell to the ground. Being inside the formation, they seemed to have become blind and deaf. Their amazing intuition as grandmasters had completely disappeared. They could not sense danger approaching them. By the time they realized that a flying knife was already on their bodies, it was useless even if they had treasured clothing to protect their bodies. However, they could not protect their throat. In the blink of an eye, Chu Li appeared again. "Everyone back to back. Defend with all your might," Lu Wuji shouted. They hurriedly retreated, but they realized that they were the only ones left. There was no one else around. Instantly, they panicked and shouted loudly. Unfortunately, their voices could not be heard by others. They were separated from each other. Even if some of the smarter ones remembered their previous positions and slowly retreated, there was still no one around. Chu Li's shadow drifted past them and took care of them one by one. Lu Wuji's martial arts was the strongest among them, so his reflexes were the sharpest. When the flying knife was about to hit his body, he reacted and raised his hand to block his throat. However, he did not expect the flying knife to hit his forehead instead of his throat. The flying knife pierced through his sturdy forehead and came out from the back of his head. Chu Li sighed in relief. This knife was not an energy blade, so it was the most powerful one. Lu Wuji was quite difficult to deal with, but he was still a distance away from Chu Li. With the help of the formation, it was easy to defeat them one by one. Among the three groups, this group was the weakest, so they were completely annihilated. As for the other two groups, about 10 people managed to escape, so only about half of them were killed. The other two groups were even more cunning. At first, they did not use formation destruction talismans, but at the last moment, they used formation destruction talismans to break out of the encirclement in one go. A white shadow suddenly flashed, and Shao Qi suddenly appeared. Her clothes were as white as snow, and her face was as fair as jade. Her bright eyes looked around and shook her head when she saw the corpses on the ground. Then, she looked up at Chu Li and sighed. "We've become enemies." Chu Li was full of smiles. The power of the perfected 10th level of the Heavenly Heart technique was indeed amazing. Coupled with the Star Stone, he accurately predicted their movements and set up a formation in advance to wait for the three groups. "You have to be careful. This time, they'll be anxious and determined to kill you. I'm afraid they'll send out their top men," Shao Qi said. Chu Li smiled. "Don't worry, their top men won't dare to act recklessly. If they really break into the Ji dynasty, the Tempest Temple's enlightened masters won't just stand by and watch." "That's good." Shao Qi nodded. She knew that Chu Li's current cultivation level was shocking. Not only was he the top young disciple, but he was also one of the top grandmasters. The fact that he was able to escape from the Sword Moon sect in one piece was proof of that. Since the Sword Moon sect's top master was in isolated cultivation, he was lucky enough to escape, which showed how powerful he was. Suddenly, a cold laugh was heard. Two figures slowly appeared. They were both white-haired elders with a ruddy complexion. Their eyes were like lightning, and their cultivation level was slightly higher than his. Chapter 1376. Chu Li's expression changed. He quickly grabbed Shao Qi and disappeared in a flash. Bang! He was hit on the back and appeared on Jade Guardian Island in the next moment. Pfft! Chu Li spat out a mouthful of blood and let go of Shao Qi. "Are you all right?" Shao Qi thought. Chu Li shook his head and smiled. "It's just a small injury. It's nothing serious." Spiritual energy surged from all directions. The Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture was activated. The palm was unusually heavy and injured his internal organs, but he quickly healed them. Chu Li shook his head. "Looks like the Sword Moon sect's top-notch master is here. How dare they?" His cultivation level allowed him to dominate the world. Even in the Sword Moon sect, one of the 8 major sects, there were only 2 or 3 people who could defeat him. He initially thought that the Sword Moon sect would not send such a master because it would easily provoke an enlightened master's attack. He did not expect them to be so bold. It seemed like they were really angered. Don't go. Shao Qi quickly shook her head. Chu Li shook his head. If I don't go, they'll definitely attack the High Duke's public house. We can't stop them. His heaven-pilfering skill failed to predict their appearance, so he wanted to know why. Watching Chu Li disappear, Shao Qi stood in the garden of Jade Guardian Island. Her beautiful face was solemn and her eyebrows were tightly knitted together. Her cultivation level had been improving, but compared to Chu Li, it was like a slow walk and a galloping horse. Now, the difference was so huge that it had become a burden. If it was not for her, he would not have been hit. Thinking of this, her heart sank. She pursed her red lips and decided to cultivate in isolation. Two white-haired elders looked around. One was depressed and angry while the other shook his head and sighed. The elder with a particularly big head and short body shook his head and sighed. Chu Li is really lawless. The Fu dynasty's 8 major sects had always stood proudly in the world. Other than the Fu dynasty, the martial arts world of the other 4 countries dared not provoke the 8 major sections. They did not expect a mere chief of the High Duke's public house from the Ji dynasty to be so bold as to kill so many disciples from the 8 major sections. If they could not kill Chu Li and annihilate the High Duke's public house, the prestige of the 8 major sects would cease to exist. The Ji dynasty, the Li dynasty, the Zheng dynasty, and the Qiu dynasty would all become restless. The other old man had a lion's nose, a wide mouth, and a body as sturdy as a tower. He stroked his thick white beard and sneered through gritted teeth. A bunch of trash. The short, big-headed elder sighed. It's not that they're incompetent, it's just that Chu Li is too powerful. Who knew that he could predict their location and set up a formation in advance? This is all the work of the Stargazing Pavilion. In my opinion, we shouldn't be in a hurry to kill him. We should greet the Stargazing Pavilion first. Even the disciples of the Stargazing Pavilion will be killed without mercy. The sturdy old man sneered. All right, then kill him. Kill me. Chu Li suddenly appeared. He looked around at the formation and shook his head. Looks like the two of you also have formation-breaking talismans. Hee, I'm Li Zidong from the Great One Palace. The small-headed elder shook his head and smiled. This is Chen Jining from the Sword Moon sect. Our Great One Palace's formation-breaking talismans are quite amazing. Chu Li, you dared to kill so many disciples from the Sword Moon sect. Aren't you afraid of the Sword Moon sect's revenge? Chu Li looked at the sturdy old man, Chen Jining, and said faintly, Previously, I personally went to the Sword Moon sect to defend myself. I didn't want to offend the Sword Moon sect, but unfortunately, the Sword Moon sect didn't give me a way out at all. Before I could say anything, you guys already attacked me. I know that even if I kneel down and beg, you guys won't let me go. If that's the case, what's there to be afraid of? Arrogant. Chen Jining gritted his teeth and sneered. Do you think you can escape? Don't think that you have a formation. Look around. Chu Li smiled. Impressive. Li Zidong waved his hand and chuckled. It's a piece of cake. It's not worth mentioning. Chen Jining sneered. Today is the day you die. After you die, the E-Public House will be buried with you. Up until now, I've killed more than 40 Sword Moon Sect's masters. There were 3 groups of people. Other than this group, the other 2 groups were ambushed by me. More than half of them were killed or injured, but they managed to escape. Damn it! Chen Jining was extremely furious. Li Zidong smiled. I'd like to ask, how did you calculate the whereabouts of the Sword Moon Sect disciples? Chu Li said, Heavenly secrets must not be revealed. It has nothing to do with Stargazing Pavilion, right? Chen Zidong asked. Chu Li shook his head. That's good, that's good. Li Zidong smiled. You're a smart person. Unfortunately, smart people don't usually live long. Chen Jining said solemnly, This will be your burial ground. Chu Li said, That might not be the case. If you kill 1 person from the High Duke's public house, I will kill 10 people from the Sword Moon sect. Goodbye. As soon as he finished, he flashed and was about to disappear. Swoosh! The flash of a sword appeared in front of him. It was so fast that he could not escape. Ding! Chu Li thrust his sword forward. The tips of the two swords collided and they both took a step back. "You're really capable," Li Zidong praised. As soon as he finished speaking, he took out a jade pendant and gently crushed it. A green light shone on Chen Jining. Chen Jining's sword suddenly disappeared. He could no longer be seen with his naked eyes. It was unbelievably fast. Swoosh! Chu Li's shoulder was hit. If he had not been vigilant and twisted his body, the sword would have pierced his heart. Swoosh! His shoulder was hit again. Chen Jining was unbelievably fast. The omniscient mirror could see him. Moreover, he had consumed the wind spirit pill, so his body movement and reflexes were much faster than ordinary people. Yet, he was not faster than Chen Jining's sword. Under the observation of the omniscient mirror, Chen Jining's body was covered in a layer of faint green light. This green light seemed to be able to break through the restraints of space, allowing Chen Jining to break through his limits and move as fast as lightning. Li Zidong from the Great One Palace chuckled. "This is our space-piercing talisman. How effective is it?" Chu Li frowned. "I have nothing to do with the Great One Palace. Why should I get involved?" "The Great One Palace and the Sword Moon sect have a deep relationship. We support each other." Li Zidong shook his head and smiled. "How can we stand by and do nothing when the Sword Moon sect is in trouble?" "Very well." Chu Li laughed coldly. "What else do you have? Show me." After being hit twice, he was able to avoid the extremely fast and invisible sword. It was all because of the nature restoration manifestation. After the Heavenly Heart technique had perfected the 10th level, the nature restoration manifestation had improved greatly. He already had an understanding of the Sword Moon sect's sword techniques, so he could predict Chen Jining's sword momentum. After more than 10 strikes, Chen Jining roared, "Again!" "Elder Chen, think carefully," Li Zidong said. Chen Jining shouted, "Less?" Clang! He was furious. He did not expect that he could not kill Chu Li even after using the space-piercing talisman. It seemed like the 2 strikes were not a big deal. If he could not kill this guy today, not only would he be embarrassed, but he would also be a sinner of the Sword Moon sect. Sigh. Li Zidong shook his head and took out a jade pendant from his inner pocket. TSS. A shrill whistle was heard as a cold light shot at Li Zidong. Chu Li swung his light blade. The light blade pierced through Li Zidong's shadow without any resistance. Li Zidong chuckled as he stood 20 feet away. He shook his head and laughed. "Young man, you're full of murderous intent." As he spoke, he crushed the jade pendant. Another green light shot at Chen Jining. Chu Li suddenly dodged and stood in front of Chen Jining to block the green light. Chapter 1377. Ha! Li Zidong laughed out loud. Chen Jining also laughed and shook his head without saying anything. Chu Li spat out a mouthful of blood. His internal organs were severely injured, so he quickly inhaled and exhaled spiritual energy and channeled the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture. The two complemented each other and rapidly healed his injuries. Then, he glared at the two men with a gloomy expression. "Haha, Chu Li, you really think you can take advantage of me?" Li Zidong shook his head and smiled. "I'm really sorry. You didn't get hit by the space-breaking spell, but the chi-breaking spell. Do you feel your inner energy leaving your body and getting weaker and weaker?" Chu Li clutched his chest and scoffed. "Looks like you guys have cheated a lot of people. You're the 20th Grandmaster who has fallen to this aura-breaching talisman, and you're the one with the highest cultivation level." Li Zidong shook his head and said, "To be honest, you are indeed a genius. To have such a cultivation at such a young age, other than that monster Wei Wuwei, you are the most powerful." Chu Li replied coldly, "You flatter me. You don't have to waste time. There's no hope for you to heal yourself. Li Zidong shook his head and said, the space-breaking talisman will become more and more powerful, and your inner force will become weaker and weaker. Eventually, you will be weakened to the innate realm. Impossible, Chu Li said coldly. Our Great One Palace is basically the Jade Talisman technique. Li Zidong smiled and said, your martial arts aren't as exquisite as the other 7 factions, but with the protection of the Jade Talisman, you're immune to all poisons. No one dares to provoke you. This chi-breaking talisman is a top-notch Jade Talisman. It's not a waste to use it on you. Chu Li, you will definitely die today. Chen Jining sneered. Li Zidong smiled and said, what a pity. Chu Li appeared 100 meters away in a flash. Li Zidong shook his head and said, you can't escape. Like a shadow, Chen Jining appeared behind Chu Li in an instant. Without waiting for him to leave, he stabbed his sword into Chu Li's shoulder. Chu Li's movements were slightly slower than usual. But now, compared to Chen Jining, he looked exceptionally slow and clumsy. He could only watch helplessly as he was stabbed. Li Zidong laughed out loud. Chen Jining sneered. His face was full of mockery and arrogance. He was not in a hurry to stab Chu Li in the mouth. He wanted to kill him slowly, one stab at a time. That was the only way to dispel the hatred in his heart. Once again, Chu Li flashed 100 meters away and increased his speed. Once again, Chen Jining appeared in front of him like a shadow. The tip of his sword turned into a cold star and was aimed at Chu Li's shoulder. However, Chu Li tilted his body and narrowly avoided the sword. Chen Jining laughed coldly. He was not in a hurry. He knew that Chu Li had a special ability that allowed him to see through his sword technique, but it did not matter. He could dodge this sword, and he could dodge the next one, but there would always be a time when he could not avoid it. As time went by, his inner energy would become weaker and weaker, and the power of the chi-breaking talisman would become stronger and stronger. Even with his amazing cultivation, there was nothing he could do unless he had the protective talisman with him. No matter how powerful he was, it was impossible for him to obtain the imperial talisman of Greater One Palace, so he would definitely become weaker and weaker. He felt like he was a cat playing with a mouse. He sneered and thrust his sword again. Chu Li continued to flee, his speed gradually increasing. Chen Jining frowned and looked at Li Zidong. Li Zidong shook his head and smiled. Looks like he's used a secret skill to stimulate his potential. He's willing to go all out. Chen Jining watched as Chu Li moved faster and faster. He actually widened the distance between them and finally disappeared. Seeing that Chu Li had disappeared, he was not in a hurry. Instead, he turned his head and smiled. Can you catch up to him? Of course. Li Zidong laughed. Don't worry, he can't escape after being hit by the chi-breaking talisman. He had a smile on his face. Everything was under control. When it came to the technique of jade talismans, no one in Greater One Palace could compare to him. They continued to move forward, chasing after Chu Li like a hunting dog chasing a rabbit. They were calm because they knew that Chu Li would not be able to escape from their clutches. A moment later, Li Zidong was suddenly stunned. What's wrong? Chen Jining asked anxiously. What happened? This is strange. I can't sense anything. Li Zidong shook his head and laughed. This Chu Li is indeed quite capable. Is he trying to escape? Chen Jining looked nervous. He can't really escape, can he? This is a rare opportunity. The body-breaking talisman could only be used once. For someone as powerful as Chu Li, he would not be fooled again. The body-breaking talisman would not be able to hit him. Li Zidong laughed. It's useless no matter how powerful he is. He can't escape from my clutches. He took out a jade talisman from his inner pocket. A faint purple light flashed as he gently placed it between his eyebrows and closed his eyes. Suddenly, the purple light flickered and reflected on his face. His expression became even more solemn. A moment later, Li Zidong opened his eyes and the purple light shone back into the jade talisman. How is it? Chen Jining asked anxiously. Li Zidong nodded. He's hiding in a formation. Let's go and break his formation. As soon as he finished speaking, he strode forward with his short body supporting big head. Chen Jining hurriedly followed behind him. The two found a formation 100 miles away. Li Zidong took out a formation-breaking talisman and shook his head. Elderly, I've suffered a huge loss this time. You must compensate me. No problem. As long as we kill him, I'll compensate you. Chen Jining scoffed. The red jade talisman flew into the air. Li Zidong bit his index finger and threw a drop of blood into the jade talisman. Suddenly, the red light shone brightly. It was so bright that one could not look at it directly. The two turned around with their backs facing each other. The red light spread out like a wave. Everywhere it passed, the scenery changed from a vast sea of bamboo to a pine forest. Then, they saw Chu Li sitting cross-legged under a pine tree. He was meditating with his eyes closed. His face was pale and his body was weak. It was obvious that he had used the secret skill. Chen Jining turned into a shadow and instantly pounced forward to stab him again. Ding! Chu Li suddenly opened his eyes and shot out a knife. The cold light was like lightning. Chen Jining laughed coldly and deflected it. He was cautious and scheming. He had already predicted that Chu Li would show weakness on purpose and attack with all his might. Ding! Chu Li's other knife was blocked by Chen Jining. Chen Jining shook his head. The strength of the knife was nothing to worry about. Chu Li suddenly disappeared from where he stood. The next moment, he appeared 100 meters away. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared again. You're still too young to fight me. Chen Jining scoffed. Li Zidong laughed. I didn't expect him to have this much strength left. If it were me, I wouldn't have been able to dodge it. Chen Jining stroked his beard and smiled. To be able to cultivate to this stage at such a young age, none of them are idiots. It's always good to be careful. Don't get pecked blind instead. Elder Chen, you're really cunning. Li Zidong laughed. Then let's continue chasing. This time, he really can't make it. Chen Jining nodded. Even if he did not get hit by the energy-breaking talisman, Chu Li would not be able to do much after using the secret skill. Moreover, there was still the vicious energy-breaking talisman. Good boy, another formation. Li Zidong gritted his teeth. Another formation-breaking talisman. Elder Chen, you've lost a lot. Find him. Chen Jining gritted his teeth. This time, I must kill him. Although it was fun to play a cat-and-mouse game, it made his liver hurt to bear such a huge loss. The price of one formation-breaking talisman was too high. Compensating him with 2 talismans was enough to make him lose all his asset. When he thought of this, his hatred grew. Li Zidong first used the purple talisman to find a direction. Then, he used the formation-breaking talisman to break a formation. Chu Li was revealed. He was sitting cross-legged under a pine tree, trying his best to recover his cultivation level. Chen Jining slowly walked forward and said coldly, "It's useless. No matter how powerful the pill is, it won't help. Just accept your fate." As soon as he finished speaking, he disappeared along with his sword. Chapter 1378. When Chen Jining saw Chu Li slowly but accurately pointing at the tip of his sword, he knew something was wrong. A strange force came from the body of the sword. It was like a thunderbolt. His whole body became numb and he lost control. Even though he had the space-breaking spell, his movements still became sluggish. A dark light flashed across Chu Li's waist and sliced through Chen Jining's neck, instantly separating his head from his body. "Stop!" Li Zidong cried out. Chu Li disappeared in a flash and reappeared in front of Li Zidong in an instant. He looked at him calmly, his eyes were calm, and he seemed to be in high spirits. The previous weakness and paleness had disappeared in an instant, and it was as if he had become another person. You! Li Zidong was shocked and looked at him in confusion. Chu Li said faintly, an aura-breaching talisman is nothing more than this. What treasures do you have on you? Li Zidong frowned. Chu Li replied, I don't have anything else with me. It's just the Mahavairokkana's immobility scripture. Vairokkana's immobility scripture. Li Zidong's expression changed slightly. He gritted his teeth and said, Fine, I didn't expect you to have the Mahavairokkana's immobility scripture. Consider me unlucky. Due to the expulsion of Buddhism from the Fu dynasty, the Mahavairokkana's immobility scripture had become extinct in the Fu dynasty. However, it still existed in the other 4 countries. The power of the Great One Palace's jade talisman technique was astonishing, but it was the nemesis of the Mahavairokkana's immobility scripture. When it encountered a cultivator of Mahavairokkana's immobility scripture, the jade talisman would be like fire meeting water. However, Mahavairokkana's immobility scripture could not really restrain the jade talisman. He did not use an aura-breaching talisman on Chu Li and only gave Chen Jining a space-breaching talisman. Chu Li could not do anything to the Mahavairokkana's immobility scripture. Li Zidong shook his head in annoyance and sighed. How unlucky! If he had not used the aura-breaking talisman, he and Chen Jining would not have been misled by Chu Li, falling into his trap step by step, and finally being killed by him in one hit. Chu Li calmly said, I have nothing to do with the Great One Palace. I can spare you this time, but don't blame me for being merciless the next time I meet someone from the Great One Palace. Li Zidong shook his head. Chu Li, although you're powerful, you won't be able to escape. Chu Li could not help but laugh. Without the Great One Palace, how could the Sword Moon sect have broken through my formation? They would have been annihilated. This time, we'll be able to kill 60 to 70 of them. Let's see how much more trouble they can cause. Even without these dozens of people, the Sword Moon sect's strength is still great. It won't collapse. Li Zidong shook his head and said, But your public house is different. You only have a dozen or so grandmasters. Even if 2 of them die, your strength will be greatly damaged. How can you compare to the Sword Moon sect? If anything happens to the High Duke's public house, I'll kill every disciple of the Sword Moon sect one by one. Unless they hide in the Sword Moon Peak and never come out. Good, you're vicious enough. Li Zidong nodded and said, If you kill Old Chen, not only will the Sword Moon sect not be afraid, but they will also become even more furious. They will charge over even more frenziedly. Can you handle that? Chu Li smiled without saying a word. Li Zidong asked, Do you need some jade talismans to help? Chu Li scoffed. Is this how the Great One Palace does things? This is just my personal way of doing things. Li Zidong shook his head and said, You are worth helping. Maybe you can help me in the future. Chu Li smiled. How do you know that I'm willing to help you? There's no harm in having another friend. Li Zidong smiled. But my jade talismans are not cheap. Chu Li waved his hand and said, There's no need for that. Alright then, let's see if you can get through this. Li Zidong waved his hand and fluttered away. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared from Chu Li's sight. Chu Li quietly watched him disappear, deep in thought. It seemed that the so-called cooperation was not an iron plate. There were gaps that could be exploited. In the next moment, he disappeared in a flash and reappeared in front of the Church of the Divine Blood's Valley. He had changed his appearance. He was just a mediocre middle-aged man. It was difficult to remember him clearly. That night, he attacked the Church of the Divine Blood from here and broke into the Sutra Library. At that time, with Zhao Dai's identity, the scene was still vivid in his mind as if it was just yesterday. Wei Wuwei's martial arts amazed him. Apart from Sun Mingwei, only Wei Wuwei had such a cultivation level at such a young age. Chu Li's cultivation level had improved greatly, but he did not know how far he was from Wei Wuwei. However, this was not the time to compete with Wei Wuwei. If something happened to him, the public house would be in danger. It was more important to get down to business. Who are you? Two young men in black clothes fluttered in front of him and scoffed. Their eyes flashed as they examined him. Chu Li took out a letter and said, I'm a disciple of the Prophecy Pavilion. This is a letter for Wei Wuwei. Please pass it to him. As he spoke, he gently threw the letter at one of the young men like a flying knife. The young man reached out and caught it. He frowned and stared at Chu Li. He felt the numbness in his fingers and knew that his cultivation level was higher than his. He scoffed. Prophecy Pavilion? Chu Li nodded. Yes, Wei Wuwei will know after reading the letter. Tell me your name. No need. Chu Li fist saluted and said, Goodbye. He turned and fluttered away. The two young men did not chase after him. The letter was quickly delivered to a magnificent basilica in the valley. There were two people sitting in the hall. One was a tall and valiant young man in a dark green robe. He was handsome and elegant, and he wore a dark green robe. He was Wei Wuwei. The other was a handsome middle-aged man who was reading a stack of scrolls. He was Wei Wuwei's senior brother, Zhang Shi. An old man quietly handed the letter to Wei Wuwei. Wei Wuwei sat boldly in the armchair and took out the letter. He looked at it a few times and smiled. Interesting. Zhang Shi put down the file and asked, What's the matter? Wei Wuwei smiled and handed it over. Senior Zhang, someone sent a message saying that the Sword Moon sect went to the Ji dynasty to deal with the public house. The result was a mess and dozens of grandmasters were killed. Their strength was greatly reduced. Oh, is it true? Zhang Shi reached out and took the letter. He quickly glanced at it and nodded. What's the intention of the person who wrote it? It's nothing more than to stir up trouble. Wei Wuwei shook his head and smiled. They said it was the Divine Intelligence Pavilion. In my opinion, it should be the Stargazing Pavilion. Zhang Shi frowned. They want us to take the opportunity to deal with the Sword Moon sect and then deal with us? Wei Wuwei said, Most likely. We have to be careful. Zhang Shi's face darkened. Stargazing Pavilion will pay for this sooner or later. Daring to invade their altar was the biggest provocation. If they did not retaliate, it was tantamount to letting everyone see the weakness of the Church of the Divine Blood. They would not miss the opportunity to hit them when they were down. The Sword Moon sect has always been overbearing. It's time to deal with them. Wei Wuwei smiled. Zhang Shi frowned. Isn't this what the Stargazing Pavilion wants? If we don't dare to attack, everyone will know that we're afraid. Wei Wuwei scoffed. What if the Stargazing Pavilion takes the opportunity to attack again? Zhang Shi asked. Wei Wuwei said, Then I'll attack the Sword Moon Peak alone. It's too dangerous. No matter how weak the Sword Moon sect is, it's still the Sword Moon sect. Wei Wuwei smiled. The Sword Moon Peak can't keep me here. It's time to let others know how powerful we are. After the Church of the Divine Blood was dealt a heavy blow, everyone was eyeing them covetously. He needed to raise his reputation and form a deterrent force. Otherwise, there would be another battle to attack the mountain. All right. Zhang Shi sighed. Thank you, junior brother Wei. Wei Wuwei said, After this, I'll go to the Ji dynasty to take a look. I want to see what kind of powerful people can provoke the Sword Moon sect. Chapter 1379. After Chu Li sent the news to the Church of the Divine Blood, he did not need to guess to know the result. With Wei Wuwei's pride, even if he knew it was a trap and was being used, he would not let it go. The Church of the Divine Blood needed this opportunity. If they could heavily injure the Sword Moon sect, the other sects would be intimidated. They would know that the Church of the Divine Blood was still the Church of the Divine Blood and not a toothless tiger. He suddenly appeared on Jade Guardian Island. There were no lights on Jade Guardian Island. The moonlight poured down like water. Xiao Qi was practicing her swordsmanship in the garden. Her sword flashed like lightning and she was drenched in sweat. Her face was flushed but her eyes were cold. Chu Li knew what she was thinking when he saw her. He shook his head helplessly. He knew that she was in a dead end and felt that she was a burden. He jumped into the circle of swords and fought with her. After 100 moves, Shao Qi put away her sword. Her eyes were calm again. She rolled her eyes at him, knowing that he was coaxing her. If he really went all out, her regal sword technique would not last more than 10 moves. Chu Li smiled and shook his head. Madam, your swordsmanship is excellent and your cultivation level is high. I was gifted by the heavens and had a fortuitous encounter. Shao Qi glanced at him. Don't worry, I've thought it through. Chu Li sighed and smiled. I've decided to isolate myself at Spirit Crane's Peak, Shao Qi said. Chu Li's smile froze. Shao Qi said, Don't worry, it's not what you think. I have to catch up to you. I just feel that I've been slacking for a while and need to tighten up. How long? Chu Li sighed. I'll be fine in a few days, Shao Qi said. I've been feeling it lately. I might be able to break through a level. That's good. Chu Li smiled again. Let's go back to Tianshu Courtyard. Shao Qi sheathed her sword. Second eldest sister might be worried. The two returned to Tianshu Courtyard in a flash. The night was like water. Tianshu Courtyard was brightly lit as if it was daytime. Shao Shi was playing the guzheng in the gazebo. The sound of the guzheng was like a white crane dancing in the sky. She wore a snow-white gown, and her beautiful face glowed with a gentle luster under the light. It was as if she was carved out of white jade, and her beauty was beyond comparison. After Chu Li and Xiao Qi suddenly appeared, the music stopped abruptly. Xiao Shi looked up. Second eldest sister, Shao Qi said, everything has been resolved. Xiao Shi nodded lightly and looked at Chu Li from head to toe. Chu Li smiled. I'm not hurt. Xiao Shi scoffed. How can you not be injured? Which time didn't I try to be brave? I'm really not hurt. Chu Li chuckled. I've cultivated the Heavenly Heart technique to the 10th level and used the Heaven Stealing skill to spy on their sneak attack routes. I set up a formation along the way and waited for them to ambush me. They fell into the trap one by one and not many of them managed to escape. Shao Shi's watery eyes suddenly lit up. Chu Li smiled and shook his head. Your Heavenly Heart technique cultivation level is still far from enough. You'll have to take it slow. There are no shortcuts. All right, Xiao Shi scoffed. I've only reached the 6th level. I'm still far from it. Chu Li smiled without saying a word. Naturally, he would not say that Xiao Shi was a genius who cultivated the Heavenly Heart technique, and that her speed was shockingly fast. They won't come back, right? Shao Shi asked. Chu Li said, I'll inform the Church of the Divine Blood. If nothing goes wrong, the Sword Moon sect won't have the energy to care about this. You're fanning the flames. Xiao Shi pursed her lips and chuckled. You're really bad. Shao Qi smiled and told him that she was going to Spirit Crane's Peak to cultivate in isolation. Xiao Shi decided to cultivate in isolation too, so she could keep Chu Li company at Spirit Crane's Peak. Chu Li nodded. Suan should be here by now. Why isn't he here yet? Shao Shi frowned. Chu Li nodded. No matter how slow Suan was, he should have reached the fairy's capital by now. Shao Shi said, I need to see Suan before I cultivate in isolation. I need to inform him so that he won't think that we're avoiding him and neglecting him when he arrives. She looked at Chu Li with her bright eyes. You can find him directly, can't you? More or less. I'll try. Chu Li said. He gave Suan a titanium Sarira prayer bead. Through it, he could sense Suan and arrive in an instant. Bring second eldest sister there. I'll see him later, Shao Qi said. All right. Chu Li nodded. He grabbed Xiao Shi's waist and disappeared in an instant. The next moment, the two appeared outside an inn in a small town. The inn was brightly lit with lanterns hanging high. The inn only had one floor. Standing outside, One could hear loud chatter and laughter from inside. The sweet singing and the sound of strings mixed together. It was lively. Seosher wore a white gown and a white veil covered her face. She looked at the inn from top to bottom. Suan is staying here? Chuli nodded. The two stepped into the inn. As expected, the main hall was a restaurant. The tables were filled with people. Suan sat alone at a table. He was eating 2 plates of vegetarian dishes with a smile on his face. He looked like he was in high spirit. He wore a red robe and was very eye-catching. He was young, which made him even more unique. However, no one came to disturb him. They all pretended not to see him. The Ji dynasty and the Li dynasty worshipped Buddhism. Monks had a high status. Chuli and Seosher sat directly opposite him. Suan stood up in surprise and bowed with pressed palms. Big brother Chu, Seo. Aunt Seo. Seosher rolled her eyes at him. What are you doing dilly-dallying all the way here? Suan felt a sense of familiarity and warmth when she glanced at him. There was no longer any awkwardness or distance between them. He scratched his head in embarrassment. I want to observe people's hearts. What's there to observe? Humans are evil by nature. None of them are good people. It's fine if you don't observe. Seosher scoffed. It'll be peaceful even if you don't observe. Suan shook his head. Everyone has a Buddhist nature. Come on. Seosher rolled her eyes at him. She pinched her thumb and scoffed. Only a little Buddhist nature. The rest is all demonic nature. That's why it's so hard to become a Buddha. Suan was stunned. He was speechless. Chuli smiled. You two talk first. I'll be back soon. Go. Seosher waved her hand. Her bright eyes stared at Suan. Chuli shook his head and laughed. Her feelings for Suan were pure concern. Suan also saw her as family. They did not spend much time together. This was fate. Chuli disappeared from the tavern. His figure flashed twice and appeared in a restaurant not far away. This restaurant was brightly lit as if it was daytime. It was much more popular than the tavern. The 3rd floor where he was at was quiet. The rooms were quiet and elegant. He could vaguely hear the noise from below. It was a good place to stay in the middle of the hustle and bustle. He knocked on the door of one of the rooms. Come in. A melodious voice came from inside. Chuli pushed the door open and entered. A graceful woman was sitting inside. It was Lu Yurong. She was holding a wine glass and raising it gently. Chuli sat opposite her and smiled. Miss Lu, you really care about Suan. I'm returning your favor. Lu Yurong said. Chuli shook his head and smiled. I don't think so. Lu Yurong smiled. Are you afraid that I'll harm him? Chuli said. Miss Lu, your methods are not ordinary. Do you really want to take Suan's life? He saw the masters surrounding Suan. They were surrounding him. There was a murderous aura. It was obvious that they wanted to kill Suan but were trying their best to hide their murderous aura. Chapter 1380. Chuli sighed. This was probably the Crown Prince's idea? Lu Yurong said. The Crown Prince would not have thought of this. Then Miss Lu must have figured out the Crown Prince's intentions. Chuli shook his head and sighed. You really are taking precautions. Lu Yurong poured a glass of wine for Chuli and handed it to him personally. If you were me, what would you do? Chuli nodded. Kill him first. As long as you understand. Lu Yurong smiled brightly, her face brighter than the light. If it wasn't for me, Suan would have died many times already. Chuli frowned. If that's the case, I have to thank you, Miss Lu. You don't have to thank me, as long as you don't blame me. Lu Yurong shook her head. Chuli said impatiently, What about the favor? If you do this, how are we going to live in the future? Lu Yurong pursed her lips and chuckled. I will definitely keep my word. I have been suppressing them and personally stopping them from making a move. Chuli looked at her deeply. He could not tell if what she said was true or false. No matter what, Lu Yurong really wanted to kill Suan. She did not do it because she was worried about him. Lu Yurong said, I heard that the Fu dynasty's Sword Moon sect attacked the High Duke's public house and you stopped them? Chu Li nodded. Lu Yurong chuckled, your ability is getting better. You provoked the Sword Moon sect and still managed to escape unscathed. I'm really impressed. Chu Li looked at her sideways. Lu Yurong shook her head, the Sword Moon sect will not let you go. You can hide for now but not forever. In my opinion, it's better not to leave the fairy's capital. Chu Li said, the Sword Moon sect is not that scary. The Sword Moon sect is scarier than you think. Lu Yurong scoffed, the 8 major sects are not to be trifled with. No matter how powerful you are only one person. You can't stop them. Chu Li smiled and did not say much. Lu Yurong scoffed, all right, I promise I will not assassinate Suan within a year. Chu Li said, Miss Lu, you are getting more and more scheming in front of me. It had been less than 2 years since the Emperor ascended to the realm beyond heavens. Within a year, no matter how much Suan struggled, he would not be able to cause any trouble. The most crucial moment would be a year later. If Suan were to cause trouble again, they would kill him. Lu Yurong took a sip of the fine wine. Don't worry about Suan for now. Take care of yourself first. Don't get killed by the Sword Moon sect. You won't be able to protect yourself. After she finished speaking, she smiled sweetly, looking extremely flirtatious. Chu Li was being held back by the Sword Moon sect. She felt as if a huge boulder had been removed from her shoulders. Chu Li's existence was like an invisible boulder. Even if he did not make a move, there was still an invisible deterrent. Chu Li scoffed, even if I can't even protect myself, it's not difficult for me to fight to the death. You should advise the Crown Prince not to do anything stupid. If anything happens to Suan, I'll have no other choice. Lu Yurong narrowed her bright eyes, looking cold. Chu Li stared back at her calmly. After staring at each other for a long time, they slowly moved their eyes away. From an outsider's point of view, they seemed to be gazing at each other passionately. However, it was actually the glint of a knife and the shadow of a sword. All right, I'll talk to the Crown Prince. Lu Yurong felt Chu Li's determination. She felt a chill in her heart and nodded casually. Chu Li smiled. That's good. He stood up and closed-fist saluted. Then I'll take my leave. Lu Yurong scoffed and rolled her eyes at him. She turned her back to him and looked out the window. Chu Li smiled and pushed the door open. Chu Li and Suan sat at the square table. Xiao Shi was at the side pouring tea for them. Suan pressed his palms together and received the teacup with both hands. Chu Li casually took the teacup and took a sip. He looked at Suan. Suan, have you thought about it carefully? Do you want to fight for the throne? Fight for the throne. Suan looked hesitant. Chu Li said, if you want to train your heart, why don't you sit on the throne? That's the best way to train your heart. Suan hesitated. If I were to take the throne, I'm afraid I'll be met with endless killing. The fight for the throne had always been a bloodbath. If he were to make this decision, who knows how many people would die. Chu Li smiled. You're cultivating the 10 lifetimes of Buddhahood. Can't you see through life and death? Can't you transcend the trials of life and death? Suan shook his head. Chu Li said, looks like you're not a qualified disciple of the Titanium Temple. Xiao Shi scoffed. That's for the best. Is it good to have a cold heart and look at the world coldly? This is the way to transcend, Chu Li said. Only this way can you obtain the samadhi of the Titanium Temple's heart technique. Cold and inhumane. What's so good about it? Xiao Shi pouted. Suan nodded. He was kind by nature and did not like fighting or noise. The reason he left the temple to cultivate this time was to train his state of mind and improve himself. If not for that, he would not have left the temple. He felt that living in the temple was the most stable and comfortable. Looks like you don't want to fight for the throne, Chu Li said. Suan nodded. Xiao Shi said, if you don't want to, then don't. Don't force yourself. The throne isn't that good. The emperor can only live for 100 years. Suan smiled apologetically. Chu Li nodded. If you don't want to, don't stay in the fairy's capital for too long. Don't exceed a year. Or else the crown prince will make a move. Suan bowed with pressed palms. Xiao Shi let out a sigh of relief. I was really afraid that you wouldn't be satisfied. Suan shook his head. I like to cultivate in peace. I don't want to do anything else. That's good. Xiao Shi smiled. She turned her head and glared at Chu Li. Since Suan doesn't want to fight for the throne, you don't have to waste your energy. Chu Li smiled and nodded. Actually, at this point, it's very difficult to seize the throne. Whether Suan seized the throne or not did not affect him. He still had to continue. There was only one way for Suan to seize the throne: force the emperor to change his mind and appoint Suan as the emperor. There was only one way to force the emperor to change his mind, and that was to become an enlightened master. Otherwise, it would be impossible to force the emperor. Suan did not want to seize the throne. The crown prince would definitely kill him after he ascended the throne. With the High Duke's public house around, he could not escape even if he wanted to. Thus, the only way to protect himself was to become an enlightened master. No matter how he thought about it, he only had less than 2 years. Countless geniuses and heroes pursued it for their entire lives, but to no avail. If he wanted to become an enlightened master in 2 years, it would be a joke. Unfortunately, to him, if he could not complete it, even if he could fake his death with the life and death scripture, he could not possibly keep faking his death and wait for the crown prince to ascend to heaven 100 years later. Moreover, he would not allow himself to live such a useless life. Vigorous freedom, unrestrained freedom, this was the way he chose to live. As he thought about this, he felt a sense of urgency. It's getting late. We should go back. Xiao Shi was reluctant to leave. Suan, go to the fairy's capital as soon as possible. Yes. Suan nodded. Xiao Shi smiled and left with Chu Li. The next morning, Chu Li appeared outside the Sword Moon sect. He used the omniscient mirror to observe the surroundings before he silently floated into the Sword Moon sect. The entire Sword Moon Peak was under his observation. He saw Wei Wuwei, who was dressed in a dark green robe, striding up the Sword Moon Peak. There were already 2 old men waiting in a small pavilion, their eyes shining brightly. Chapter 1381. Chu Li had already asked around and found out that the Church of the Divine Blood was not very popular. The Stargazing Pavilion and the Plain Maiden Palace had joined forces to attack their headquarters once. Logically speaking, their enemies should be the Stargazing Pavilion and the Plain Maiden Palace, but that was not the case. In terms of hatred, the Sword Moon sect had the deepest hatred. The Stargazing Pavilion and the Plain Girl Palace were new enemies, while the Sword Moon sect was old. The hatred between the Divine Blood Church and the Sword Moon sect had been going on for hundreds of years. Their swords and blades had been fighting against each other. The hatred had already entered their bloodline and could not be resolved. Every generation of disciples had died at the hands of the other. Although they were all disciples of the 8 great sects, and even if a Grandmaster died, they could still enter the enlightened god grounds of their respective sects, or they could directly enter the Grandmaster's boundary without reincarnation. However, killing them was still killing them, and their hatred would not diminish because of this. When Wei Wuwei heard the news of the Sword Moon sect being destroyed, he definitely wouldn't let go of this opportunity to add insult to injury. The experts of the Sword Moon sect had been injured. If they were also defeated by him, the prestige of the Sword Moon sect would drop to its lowest point. When that happened, the other sects would definitely add insult to injury, which would greatly weaken the Sword Moon sect and give the Church of the Divine Blood a chance to take revenge. Chu Li sat cross-legged in a forest at the foot of the mountain. He closed his eyes slightly and observed Wei Wuwei's every move with the omniscient mirror to determine his cultivation level. Wei Wuwei's cultivation was still a level higher than his. While he was improving, Wei Wuwei was also improving, and at a faster rate. Chu Li shook his head lightly. He was a genius, but this Wei Wuwei was even more of a genius. Comparing oneself to others was truly infuriating. Wei Wuwei came to the gazebo with large strides, waved his hand and said, "No need to say any more, just make your move. Your Sword Moon sect had better not use that tactic of taking turns to fight me. Otherwise, the ones who will be embarrassed will still be you. I will definitely not show mercy." Little brat Wei? Guy, is it hard to chew the shebang spring? They unsheathed their swords and pounced towards Wei Wuwei. Their swords flashed out like lightning and surrounded him from both sides, not giving Wei Wuwei a chance to dodge. Ding! Ding! Wei Wuwei's palm struck out, quickly and accurately hitting the tip of the sword. His hands looked as if they were carved out of white jade, and a warm luster circulated around them. They were exquisite and exquisite, making people worry that they would shatter at the slightest touch. In the end, when he patted the sword was sent flying far away, and the sound of metal clashing rang out. The two elders frowned and waved their swords again. The powerful force coming from the swords almost made them lose their grip on the swords. They were about to fall out of their hands at any time, so their swords were a little slower. Ding ding! Amidst the clear ringing sound, the two sword tips were once again struck by the white jade-like palms, and were sent flying far away. Their swordsmanship was exquisite. They took advantage of the momentum to spin their swords, and their speed became even faster. However, the powerful force from the swords still made their palms numb, and it became even more difficult to grasp the sword hilt. They could only use their arms to move their wrists to control the sword. Ding ding! The sword's momentum became faster, but it was still not as fast as Wei Wuwei's palms. The two swords finally broke free from his hands and flew out, tumbling in the air before burrowing into the nearby forest. The two elders felt their palms go numb as they stared at their swords in disbelief. They were unable to dodge Wei Wuwei's palm energy in time. Bang bang! The two of them flew out as if they were chasing their own swords. They fell into the forest and stopped moving. They had already breathed their last. Although their cultivation levels were high, a single blood jade palm took their lives. Wei Wuwei clapped his hands and shook his head. They overestimated themselves. They were simply sending themselves to their death. How laughable, pathetic, and pitiful! He looked at the forest over there with a compassionate expression, shook his head, and left the gazebo. He continued to walk up the stone steps with large stride. He crossed 2 stone steps with each step, but he did not use his light body technique. Chu Li frowned and did not say a word. He clearly saw that Wei Wuwei's blood jade palm was not exquisite, but it was fast and ruthless. He took advantage of the fact that the two elders' cultivation levels were not as high as his. No matter how exquisite the two elders' swordsmanship was, it was useless against the blood jade palm unless the two of them did not let their swords touch the blood jade palm. Unfortunately, the blood jade palm was slightly faster than their swords, so the outcome was determined. Chu Li also shook his head. The Sword Moon sect indeed liked to take turns to exhaust their cultivation levels, and finally kill them in one blow. Chu Li watched as Wei Wuwei used the blood jade palm to move up, killing 10 top-notch masters like him, and finally encountered a white-haired elder. This white-haired elder was called Qianong, the first person under the sect leader of the Sword Moon sect. The sect leader was in isolation and could not come out, so he hurriedly came out to fight. Qin Ang's swordsmanship was so exquisite that Chu Li was amazed. It was a great inspiration to him. He had been merging the 7 forms of Divine Knife, Cloud-slashing Divine Sword, and later the Great Heaven-deriving Sword, but he could not completely merge them, so his progress was slow. Now that he saw Qin Ang's swordsmanship, Chu Li was greatly touched, and his understanding of swordsmanship deepened. Qin Ang's swordsmanship was exquisite, and Chu Li was amazed. He knew that he was no match for Qianong. The Sword Moon sect was indeed worthy of being one of the 8 major sections. They had a deep foundation, and he was lucky to be able to escape unscathed last time. Chen Ong did not come out of isolation. However, no matter how exquisite Chen Ang's swordsmanship was, Wei Wuwei still used the blood jade palm. It looked ordinary and had no fixed style, only fast and ruthless. His palm was strangely fast, and his palm force was strangely strong. When his palm hit the body of the sword momentum stopped, and he took the opportunity to attack, suppressing Chen Ang's swordsmanship. Chen Ong relied on the exquisite swordsmanship to recover, but was quickly hit by Wei Wuwei's sword again, and fell into a disadvantage again. The two were in a stalemate for hundreds of moves, and after almost 1,000 moves, they were both panting. As grandmasters, their inner energy was endless, but their inner energy was consumed too quickly, and they could not replenish it in time. In the end, their strength weakened, and their movements became slow. Wei Wuwei, today is the day you die. Suddenly, loud laughter rang out, and 2 elders appeared, rushing directly into the field. Chu Li raised his eyebrows. He saw these 2 elders hiding in the forest far away, and when he saw that Wei Wuwei was finally tired, he felt that the time was right. This method was really despicable, but it was very effective. The 2 pounced on Wei Wuwei, and the sword light was everywhere. Wei Wuwei's movements were slow, and it was difficult for him to dodge, and he was hit by 2 swords. However, he had a treasured clothing, and the 2 swords could not pierce through his treasured clothing. "Haha, Chen Ong, I'm really ashamed for your Sword Moon sect." Wei Wuwei suddenly laughed, and his palms suddenly sped up. Bam bam! The 2 elders flew out. They were also impressive masters, and although they were not as good as Wei Wuwei, they were not too far off. Wei Wuwei suddenly became invincible, and his speed was strange. He did not avoid the 2 swords, and directly attacked with his palms, exchanging injury for injury. The 2 elders did not have time to dodge, and their palms had already hit their chests. "Ha ha!" Wei Wuwei laughed, and the treasured clothing was not broken, but the 2 elders flew out, and they spat out arrows of blood in the air. After they fell to the ground, they could not move. Wei Wuwei also took a sword from Chen Ong, and was stabbed in the waist. The sword pierced through the treasured clothing, and blood gushed out like a fountain. Wei Wuwei fiercely clamped Chen Ang's sword, and regardless of the wound caused by his rotating sword, he hit Chen Ong with his palm. Bam! Chen Ong flew out, and he spat out an arrow of blood. After falling 10 meters away, he struggled to stand up, and prepared to continue attacking. Wei Wuwei grabbed Chen Ang's sword, and quickly pulled it out, and fiercely threw it into Chen Ang's chest. Chen Ong clutched the sword hilt and fell to the ground. He took out a jade bottle with difficulty, and after opening it, he poured all the pills into his mouth. He began to meditate, and ignored the long sword in his chest. The lower half of Wei Wuwei's body was dyed red with blood. The wound was a round hole, and blood was gushing out. His intestines were twisted, and it was extremely tragic. Chapter 1382. Chu Li frowned. Wei Wuwei would not be able to escape this time. He then raised his eyebrows. He remembered that Wei Wuwei's light body technique was also top-notch, but he did not use it when he went up the mountain. He only took large strides up the mountain. Now that he thought about it, he had a backup plan. He smiled. Those who had cultivated to this level were not stupid. Wei Wuwei was deliberately fooling the people from Sword Moon sect, making them think that his light body technique was ordinary. Wei Wuwei took out a porcelain bottle and crushed it. 2 blood-red pills appeared in his palm. He then stuffed them into his wounds and pressed them down. He laughed and looked at the 12 masters, shaking his head in disdain. Sword Moon sect, what a Sword Moon sect! Wei Wuwei, you're too arrogant. Do you really think we can't do anything to you? A tall and thin elder with a face as long as a horse's shook his head and said slowly, You want to challenge Sword Moon Sect by yourself? I can only say that you're crazy. Sword Moon Sect, oh Sword Moon Sect. Wei Wuwei shook his head and laughed. If you can't beat me alone, you use wheels. If you can't beat me with wheels, you surround me. That's all the Sword Moon Sect has. No matter what, it's enough to kill you. The horse-faced elder said indifferently, winner takes all. No matter how strong your martial arts are, as long as you're dead, everything will be over. Alright, then let's see if you can kill me. Wei Wuwei laughed and shook his head. Unless your sect leader comes out of isolation. It's laughable that you good-for-nothings can kill me. Go. An elder beside him said impatiently, why are you wasting time with a lunatic like him? Kill him. The horse-faced elder nodded. Everyone immediately swung their swords and stabbed. Ding 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 ding. With a series of clear sounds, Wei Wuwei slapped away the swords in front of him and shot down the mountain like a stream of light. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared in front of everyone, leaving some blood on the ground. Wei Wuwei's speed was extremely fast and there was no warning. They did not expect him to dare use a secret skill when he was so heavily injured. Caught off guard, they could only watch as he escaped. After him. Everyone flew down. Chu Li frowned and pondered. He followed closely behind them to see if Wei Wuwei could escape. Back then, he had nearly died under Wei Wuwei's hands. If he could seize this opportunity to kill Wei Wuwei, it would be a blessing to avoid future troubles. It was as if Wei Wuwei had cast the Great Void Light technique. His speed was extremely fast, covering hundreds of meters in a flash. Even though the people from the Sword Moon Sect had top-notch light body techniques, they could not catch up to him. When they arrived at the foot of the Sword Moon Peak, more than 20 experts from the Divine Blood Church were already waiting there. The moment Wei Wuwei appeared, they immediately went forward and surrounded Wei Wuwei. Wei Li shook his head in surprise. The bloody garment divine power was indeed mysterious. If it was anyone else, their injuries would have worsened and their wounds would have bled profusely. However, not only did Wei Wuwei not bleed, his wounds were sealed, and his flesh and blood recovered at a shocking speed. This was the mystery of the blood garment divine art. Their control of blood and qi was beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Seeing more than 20 experts from the Divine Blood Church, the experts from the Sword Moon Sect were not afraid. They were at the foot of the Sword Moon Peak. As long as they shouted, they could summon more experts. They decided not only to kill Wei Wuwei, but also to kill the 26 experts and deal a heavy blow to the Divine Blood Church. Wei Wuwei must die. The horse-faced elder stepped forward and stared at Wei Wuwei, who was resting on the ground with his eyes closed. If he doesn't die, we will fight to the death. You may not win. What a joke. One of the experts from the Divine Blood Church sneered. Hand over Wei Wuwei and we will stop, the horse-faced elder said in a deep voice. We only want to kill Wei Wuwei. Kill him? Kill him? Kill him? Chatter and chatter in a rut, then all of you will die together. The horse-faced elder's face darkened and he waved his hand. Kill them. Suddenly, there was a flash of sword light and a flash of knife light. The experts from the Divine Blood Church were good at knife technique. The knife light was like a waterfall while the sword light was like a cold star. When the two collided, the sound of metal clashing could be heard. The experts from the Divine Blood Church guarded Wei Wuwei closely and did not retreat. Chu Li pondered for a moment and did not make a move. He shook his head and smiled bitterly. During this time, Wei Wuwei, who was sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed, did not decrease. Instead, he had a breakthrough and his cultivation level had increased. His original injuries were no longer a hindrance. He suddenly opened his eyes and a faint purple light shot out from his eyes. Then, he slowly restrained it and shot out like a ghost. He hit the back of the horse-faced elder with his palm. The horse-faced elder sensed danger, but he could not avoid the palm and was immediately sent flying. Bang! The horse-faced elder hit a tree and slid down. It was as if all the bones in his body had been removed. He was seriously injured and on the verge of death. Wei Wuwei! Everyone roared and rushed toward Wei Wuwei. The sword light completely shrouded him. Wei Wuwei waved both of his palms and the sound of clanging could be heard. He used the blood jade palm to block all the sword light outside of his body. Not even a drop of water could enter his body. Instead, 2 long swords were sent flying. He then rushed forward and slapped the owners of the swords away, severely injuring 2 more people. Retreat! One of the experts from the Sword Moon sect said in a deep voice. The experts turned around and left. They helped the horse-faced elder and the other 2 elders up. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared into the Sword Moon Peak. The Sword Moon sect was shrouded in a formation. It was impossible for the experts from the Divine Blood Church to force their way in. Ha ha! Everyone laughed. Young leader, are you okay? Someone asked. Wei Wuwei laughed and patted the wound that was already scarred. It's just a broken intestine. I won't die. It's a pity that Chen Ong won't die either. Chen Ong is out. That guy is still impatient. I gave him a sword attack, but it didn't hit a vital point. Wei Wuwei looked regretful. Just a little bit more. Let's go. This time, it's clear. They are indeed injured. Looks like they met a tough opponent. I want to meet this Chu Li. Before he finished speaking, he suddenly disappeared. Chu Li was startled. He turned around and looked behind him. Wei Wuwei was looking at him with a smile. Who are you? Chu Li raised his eyebrows. He was surprised. How did Wei Wuwei discover him? After all, he was 10 miles away. He could only see them talking through their lip. He could not hear them. When Wei Wuwei was breaking through, he suddenly felt a gaze on him. So, he followed his intuition and came here. As expected, he found someone. He was curious about who was watching him. Chu Li shook his head. Just as he was about to disappear, Wei Wuwei said, Was it you who sent the letter? Chu Li stopped and looked at him. Wei Wuwei said, It's not the Divine Intelligence Pavilion. It's you. Oh, are you Chu Li? Chu Li smiled. I'm Chu Li. Sneaky. I'm very disappointed. Wei Wuwei looked at him and shook his head. Chu Li, I've heard of your great name. I thought you were a hero. I didn't expect you to be as despicable as the Sword Moon sect. Chu Li said, I don't have enough strength. Young leader, your divine power is amazing. I'm impressed. He was on guard. Wei Wuwei seemed to be smiling, but his murderous intent was surging. He wanted to kill him. Chapter 1383. Then let's see what you can do, Wei Wuwei said lazily. Before he finished speaking, his right palm was already in front of Chu Li's chest. It was as fast as lightning, and if he didn't die, he would be heavily injured. A dark light flashed at Chu Li's waist, and the modesty sword stabbed at his palm. Wei Wuwei frowned, and turned his palm into a knife, slashing at the sword. Ding! Chu Li's sword trembled as it collided with Wei Wuwei's blood jade palm, and the sound of metal colliding rang out. Wei Wuwei frowned. A strange force crashed into his palm, desperately trying to drill into the meridians in his wrist like a snake. The body of the sword trembled slightly, and every time it trembled, a mighty force would be transmitted, causing his palm to feel slightly numb. Chu Li knew that his cultivation was not as good as Wei Wuwei, so he couldn't take it head-on. He could only hope with his sword technique. The blood jade palm needed some time to travel from the sword to his body, which gave him a moment of buffer and more time to dissolve the earth matrix and reincarnation scripture. The blood jade palm's palm energy was pure and hard to dissolve. He had experienced its power last time, and if he couldn't dissolve the blood jade palm energy, Wei Wuwei would be able to sense him through the palm energy, and chase after him like a maggot on a bone, trying to exhaust him to death. This time, his Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture advanced to the 5th level, which was already a very high level, but he still didn't dare to take the risk. This time, Wei Wuwei really wanted to kill him. Reality proved that his cautiousness was right. Even with the sword as a buffer, the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture still had a hard time dissolving the Blood Jade Palm energy, and he barely dissolved it. Ever since he had fought with Wei Wuwei the last time, he had been thinking about how to restrain and defeat Wei Wuwei. Now, it seemed that there was indeed a glimmer of hope in using his sword skills, but if he wanted to truly defeat Wei Wuwei, just relying on his sword skills was not enough. Ding 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 ding. The Blood Jade Palm and the tip of the sword collided several times, and Wei Wuwei took 2 steps back, sizing Chu Li up. Good, as expected of the famous Chu Li, to make Sword Moon Sect suffer such a big loss. Good sword technique. Chu Li swung his sword and said calmly, "You flatter me." The remnant force of the Blood Jade Palm on his body was not completely dissipated. Wei Wuwei struck out 9 Blood Jade Palms in a single breath. Not only was the Blood Jade Palm's energy condensed and pure, but it could also be stacked on top of each other. Before Wei Wuwei could completely neutralize it, the next palm arrived. Thus, the palms stacked on top of each other and finally rushed into his internal organs, injuring him. His internal organs were aching. The Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture continued to circulate, dispelling the force of the palm. Furthermore, spiritual energy surged from all directions, healing the injuries to his internal organs. Wei Wuwei shook his head and smiled. "I hate sword experts the most, so you must die." Chu Li said coldly, "We have no enmity between us. Why must you kill me?" "Do we need a reason to kill?" Wei Wuwei laughed. "If you want to kill, then kill. If you don't like them, then naturally kill." Chu Li asked, "How have I offended the young bishop?" "I hate being used by others." Wei Wuwei shook his head and said, "You've done both. Furthermore, you're a citizen of the Ji dynasty, so you deserve to die even more. Don't even think about living. Just accept your death. It'll be your honor to die by my hands." Chu Li laughed. Wei Wuwei felt Chu Li's sarcasm and mockery. There was even a hint of disdain in it. Wei Wuwei was instantly enraged. He said coldly, "Although your sword technique is good, it's only for show and no substance. You only look impressive." He could feel that Chu Li's inner energy was inferior to his. His Blood Jade Palm was just bullying others whose cultivation level was lower than his. It was ferocious and unparalleled. Chu Li was definitely no match for him. Chu Li shook his head. That might not be the case. Wei Wuwei took a step in front of him and slammed his palm down. The inner energy around Chu Li's body was suddenly withdrawn. He did not circulate the cloud-slashing power and the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture. Instead, he circulated the heavenly demonic power that he had not used for a long time. He had consumed a large number of wind speed pills and giant spirit pills. Even without inner energy, the strength and speed of his body far surpassed that of a normal grandmaster. At this time, although he did not have inner energy, his sword was still extremely fast. Ding! Wei Wuwei's palm was hit again. The Blood Jade Palm force entered through the sword hilt. The heavenly demonic orb that was as small as a speck of dust had already appeared in his palm. It swallowed the Blood Jade Palm force in one gulp. The Blood Jade Palm's inner energy was pure and firm. The heavenly demonic orb was very interested in it. Chu Li let out a long sigh of relief. He was most worried that the heavenly demonic orb would not be interested in the Blood Jade Palm force. If that was the case, he would be seriously injured and his life would be in danger. Ding 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 ding. The tip of Chu Li's sword never left Wei Wuwei's palm. In the blink of an eye, the two of them exchanged more than 20 moves. The crisp sound was like a jade pearl rolling on a jade plate. Wei Wuwei's Blood Jade Palm was even faster. A white palm shadow that looked like jade enveloped Chu Li. He waved his palm while frowning at Chu Li. Wei Wuwei's eyes were sharp. He had already noticed that Chu Li was injured. He knew the power of the blood jade palm better than anyone else. If one's cultivation level was lower than his, he would definitely be injured. His sword was not as fast as before. However, he was able to block the blood jade palm with his exquisite swordsmanship and strange sense of foresight. His injuries did not worsen. Instead, they healed. This was very strange. It made him a little angry. Chu Li smiled. Not only because he found a way to restrain Wei Wuwei, but also because he thought of Sun Mingyue. Ever since he perfected the 10th level of the Heavenly Heart technique, he had not returned to the Li dynasty. He was afraid that he would lose his life if he met Sun Mingyue. Now, he finally found a way to protect himself from Sun Mingyue, the heavenly demonic power. Ding 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 ding. Chu Li waved his sword. He shook his head and sighed. It's just SOSO. You're asking for it. Wei Wuwei shouted. His palm changed again. A layer of red appeared on his white, jade-like palm. It was as if he had smeared a layer of rouge on it. There was a hint of flirtatiousness in the warm luster. After his palm turned red, it became faster and stronger. His palm energy became purer and more condensed. It was like a real sword piercing into Chu Li. The tip of Chu Li's sword was deflected from time to time. He used his strong palm energy to block it. His body technique followed the sword's movements and easily avoided Wei Wuwei's sneak attack. The nature restoration manifestation was a great help. Otherwise, he would not have been able to avoid Wei Wuwei's ghostly body technique. In the blink of an eye, more than 100 moves had passed. The heavenly demonic orb had absorbed so much blood jade palm energy, but it did not feel full at all. Although the blood jade palm was powerful, it was still far from an enlightened master's inner energy. The accumulated force of nearly 200 palms was still not as good as one palm from an enlightened master. Chu Li wondered if he should use the heavenly demonic body to kill Wei Wuwei. As soon as this thought came to him, Wei Wuwei's eyes flashed red. His body speed doubled and he hit Chu Li in an instant, sending him flying. Chu Li thought of something and the heavenly demonic orb suddenly swallowed the palm energy. He appeared 100 meters away and planned to exhaust Wei Wuwei. After using the secret skill, Wei Wuwei would not be able to hold on for long. Once the secret skill lost its effect, he would not be as scary as before. Wei Wuwei crossed 100 meters in one step and hit Chu Li again. Chapter 1384. Chu Li took a step back and shook his head with a smile. It's useless, you can't hurt me. Wei Wuwei retreated and frowned at him. What martial art is this? Chu Li smiled without saying a word. Wei Wuwei's eyes flashed red. Not only did he not lose consciousness, but he became sharper and smarter. His thoughts were like lightning as he disappeared in a flash and reappeared 100 meters away. Ha ha! Chu Li laughed. Go, go, I'll spare your life. His face was full of mockery, contempt, and disdain. Wei Wuwei's face was gloomy, but he did not hesitate and reappeared 200 meters away. He was already very far away from Chu Li. He could still see the disdain and mockery on Chu Li's face. As he turned to leave, Chu Li's expression kept flashing in front of him. Ah! Wei Wuwei roared in anger. He suddenly appeared behind Chu Li and pushed out with his palms. Bang! Chu Li flew forward. He seemed to have expected this attack. As he flew out, he fiercely swung his body backwards. Two cold lights suddenly shot in front of Wei Wuwei's eyes. Wei Wuwei let out a breath. The two flying knives were slowed by this force and immediately stopped. Wei Wuwei raised his head to avoid it. TSK TSK. He had just avoided these two knives when the other two came at his throat. Wei Wuwei put his palms in front of his throat. Ding ding! The two knives fell as if they had hit metal. Chu Li crashed into a poplar tree. He extended his sword and pointed at the tree, shooting back at Wei Wuwei at an even faster speed. Ding 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 ding. The tip of the sword was like a sky full of stars sprinkling on Wei Wuwei's body. Wei Wuwei waved his rouge-white jade palm to meet the stars. In the blink of an eye, more than 100 swords were thrust out, and the clear ringing sound was heard. At first glance, it sounded like the lingering sound of a single strike. Chu Li had already activated the heavenly demon body. His appearance did not change, but he was faster and stronger. The power of the sword made Wei Wuwei secretly grit his teeth. His blood jade palm was trained to the extreme and was as hard as jade. Chu Li's modesty sword was sharp, but it could not break through his palms. The two were in a stalemate. After exchanging more than 1,000 blows in one go, Chu Li's sword force became more and more intense. His eyes were deep and serene, as if they could absorb the spirit of others. Wei Wuwei's eyes shot out a red glow, and his palms were white with a hint of red, forming a shadow. Dust, sand, leaves, and branches were all gone from their surroundings. It was so clean that it seemed as if someone had fiercely swept it. A strange and cold baleful aura pervaded the surroundings. This was emitted by the blood jade palm. It could disturb one's state of mind, corrode one's body, and destroy the circulation of one's blood energy. This blood jade palm was extremely vicious and hard to defend against. Wei Wuwei suddenly disappeared 10 meters away. Chu Li sheathed his sword and looked at him coldly. Wei Wuwei's eyes flickered with red light, and he nodded and said, "Count yourself lucky, I'll spare you today." Without waiting for Chu Li to reply or mock him, he disappeared in a flash and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Chu Li heaved a long sigh of relief. This Wei Wuwei was really difficult to deal with. After using the heavenly demonic power, Wei Wuwei could not do anything to him, and it was also difficult for him to kill him. The stalemate between them was very troublesome. He took a deep breath and quickly dispelled the heavenly demonic power. He immediately activated the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture and Cloud Slashing Power. The baleful aura emitted by the blood jade palm had a great impact on one's blood energy and was extremely destructive to one's body. Even though he had consumed a large number of giant spirit pills and wind speed pills, he still had no resistance against this baleful aura. It was as if his body was being pricked by countless fine needles. He had to get rid of it in time, or else it would become a fatal injury. He activated the cloud slashing power to devour this baleful aura. He was about to use the divine void light technique to leave, when he suddenly had a thought and disappeared in a flash. Bang! A red shadow flashed, and his disappeared figure reappeared. He was sent flying, and he spat out an arrow of blood in the air. A red-robed elder appeared where Chu Li was just a moment ago. His eyebrows and beard were all red as if they had been dyed by cinnabar. His eyes were bright and piercing like electricity. He narrowed his eyes and stroked his red beard as he stared at Chu Li. Chu Li fell to the ground with a bang. His internal organs were boiling as if they were being cooked. The blood energy in his body was scattered, and he could not exert any strength. "You're quite capable, little boy." The red-robed elder shook his head and disappeared again. Chu Li desperately activated the life and death scripture to absorb the spiritual energy from all directions. At the same time, he activated the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture in an attempt to reverse his injuries. However, the palm was too strong, and his internal organs were completely destroyed. The elder's palm energy had dissipated, and the heavenly demonic orb was useless. Only the Life and Death Scripture and the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture could save his life. He could not use God's limbs now, and his body could not withstand the pressure of the void energy. He struggled to take out a jade bottle, poured out a spirit blessing pill, and stuffed it into his mouth. He looked at Wei Wuwei, who appeared and slowly approached him. Wei Wuwei looked at him calmly. His face was pale, and his eyes were no longer shining red. There was only indifference. "That's your master, right?" Chu Li smiled bitterly and stood up with difficulty. Wei Wuwei nodded slowly. Chu Li laughed and shook his head. Wei Wuwei said, Master is personally taking action. You can go in peace. Chu Li smiled and shook his head. I didn't expect your master to have such a cultivation level. He's only one step away from becoming an enlightened master, right? The attack was sudden and fast, and it had the elegance of an enlightened master. That's right. Wei Wuwei nodded slowly. What martial art did you use? He knew that Chu Li was stalling for time to recover from his injuries. However, his master's blood jade palm was different from his. Even if he had a spirit medicine that could bring the dead back to life, he could not recover in a short period of time. If he could not kill a severely injured Chu Li, he would not be the young bishop of the Church of the Divine Blood. There were very few martial arts in the world that could block his blood jade palm. He really wanted to know the nameless technique. Chu Li shook his head. The secret of the heavenly demonic power must not be leaked, or there would be endless trouble. Once people knew about the heavenly demonic power, they would guess that he could change his identity. Their murderous intent towards him would be even stronger, and they would not allow him to live. The identity of the heavenly demonic sect's disciples was hidden, and no one knew about them. They lived in the shadows because of their scruples. The nameless technique. Wei Wuwei frowned. Chu Li said, I got it by chance, so I don't know what martial art it is. This heart technique can be cultivated very quickly, but it can't stop the shamelessness of the Church of the Divine Blood. The Sword Moon sect is shameless, and so are you. You're all jackals of the same tribe. Wei Wuwei said plainly, You're really strong, but you're from the Ji dynasty's martial arts world. Otherwise, I could spare your life to stimulate my cultivation. Having an equal opponent was the most beneficial for cultivation, so he would not slack off. Chu Li was an excellent candidate and a genius. He was young, but he had peerless martial arts and was also extremely intelligent. Chu Li desperately urged the spiritual energy around him, and the spirit blessing pill began to activate. However, his internal organs did not show any signs of recovery. The blood in his body seemed to have lost its nutrients and turned into poison, constantly destroying his internal organs. Wei Wuwei said, It's useless. My master's blood jade palm will directly destroy your vitality. The medicine is ineffective. Chu Li asked, Is there any way to cure it? Wei Wuwei smiled and shook his head. There's no cure. I can only wait for death. Chu Li frowned. If that's the case, I'll take my leave. Although his internal organs had deteriorated, the spiritual energy could be directly converted into inner energy. He activated the void light technique and disappeared in a flash. Chapter 1385. Wei Wuwei smiled, but his eyes were cold. Chu Li, it's useless. You don't have to struggle anymore. You can't escape. Chu Li wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and frowned. Must you kill me? Yes. Wei Wuwei said, It's useless even if you kneel and beg. Chu Li took a deep breath and sighed. I only have one request. Leave my corpse intact. Wei Wuwei looked deeply at him and finally shook his head, spitting out two words, behead. Beheading a person was the only way to kill him. This was his principle. Chu Li had a fortuitous encounter. Who knew if he had some special skill that could fool the world by pretending to be dead? Beheading him was more reliable. Chu Li sighed. If that's the case, it's either you or me. Yes. Wei Wuwei answered coldly. He knew that Chu Li would not reveal his heart technique, so he did not want to waste time talking to a dead person. He was already impatient and wanted to kill him. Chu Li disappeared in a flash. Wei Wuwei shook his head and disappeared too. Chu Li kept flickering and vomiting blood. The pressure from the void was worsening his injuries. He only shifted 1 mile at a time and did not dare to go further than that. Otherwise, the pressure from the void would be too great. Compared to teleporting 5 kilometers away, the The pressure of the void was not only 10 times stronger, it was even 20 to 30 times stronger. Wei Wuwei watched as Qin Wentian coughed up blood and fled for his life, but he wasn't in a hurry to act. He wanted to see where Qin Wentian would flee to. Perhaps he would flee to the side of his beloved, and then die in front of her. That would be interesting. It was said that Chu Li's wife was a rare beauty. He wanted to see if he could kill Chu Li in front of her. That would be interesting. Chu Li suddenly stopped and took a step forward before disappearing again. Wei Wuwei frowned. He suddenly lost his sense of Chu Li as if he disappeared into thin air. He was completely dead. He understood in the next moment. Chu Li had entered a formation and was protected by it. His senses were cut off. He frowned and looked around. After a while, he shook his head. He could not sense the existence of the formation at all. This was obviously a very advanced invisible formation that could deceive one's senses. This was a very advanced formation. He did not expect someone in the Ji dynasty to have such a high level of formation cultivation. He should not be underestimated. He thought about it and gave up on the idea of asking his master for help. Master was worried about his safety, so he came over as soon as he came out of isolated cultivation. He made an exception and attacked Chu Li once. If he could not kill Chu Li, he would not attack again. He still had to rely on himself to kill Chu Li. Chu Li had been severely injured by his master. If he still could not kill him, he would be too ashamed to face his master. He thought for a moment, then disappeared. After a while, he returned, holding a formation-breaking talisman in his hand. This was something he had snatched from the experts of the Supreme Palace. It was priceless, and it was not easy for the Supreme Palace to refine it. The blood-red formation-destroying talisman flew into the air. He bit his index finger and flung out a drop of blood. The droplet of blood flew onto the formation-breaking talisman and disappeared in an instant, just like how Chu Li disappeared into the formation. A blazing red light shot out in all directions. He couldn't help but close his eyes. When he opened them again, the red light had already spread out and condensed into a red cloud 100 meters away, like the sunset glow of the setting sun. The red light flickered for a moment before disappearing. He furrowed his brows. He had not sensed Chu Li's presence, and the formation-breaking talisman could not break this formation. Bang! He slammed a hole in the ground with his palm. He was furious and unwilling to give up. This was the best opportunity. From now on, Chu Li would never appear in the Fu dynasty again. He had to go to the Ji dynasty to guard against his master's sneak attack. Without being able to sense him, it would be too difficult to catch him, so he could not miss this opportunity. Chu Li was almost dead. He had been hit by his master's blood jade palm, and there was no cure for it. Unless someone with a cultivation level higher than his master channeled their energy to cleanse his body, he could only be saved. There were only 2 people in the Ji dynasty who had such a cultivation level, and they were both enlightened masters. Chu Li was hiding in the formation. Even if he did not attack, he was still slowly approaching death. It was a pity that he was not the one who did it, so it was a pity and incomplete. When he thought of this, he sat cross-legged on the ground and waited for Chu Li to die. Inside the formation, Chu Li sat cross-legged on a rock. White steam was rising from the top of his head, and his face was rosy. He did not look injured at all. He was cautious and had set up many formations in the Fu dynasty. This time, he was in an emergency again. He desperately activated the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture and the Life and Death Scripture to heal his injuries and heal them with spiritual energy. However, the injuries on his internal organs did not seem to be getting better. His blood was corroding his organs like poison. His vision darkened, and his brain was being corroded by this strange force. Chu Li desperately tried to think of a way to save his life. The medicinal effect of the spirit blessing pill was circulating in his organs, but it did not alleviate his injuries. It seemed like nothing could stop his body from deteriorating and weakening. Chu Li secretly estimated that if this went on, he would die completely in an hour. He did not have time to find out how to restrain the blood jade palm. This palm was too vicious, but there was no invincible martial art in the world. There was always a way to restrain it. Unfortunately, he did not have the time to find out and cultivate it. Chu Li took a deep breath and made a prompt decision. He could only seek survival in the face of death. Spiritual energy surged from all directions and was quickly converted into the divine light technique's inner energy in his dantian. It surged violently in his body. He disappeared in a flash and appeared on the Jade Guardian Island in the next moment. As soon as he appeared on the Jade Guardian Island, he spat out blood. His organs felt like they had been cut into countless pieces, and there were even small pieces of flesh mixed in the blood that spurted out. Shao Qi had sharp senses and was anxiously waiting on the Jade Guardian Island. When she saw him, she quickly went forward to support him. Chu Li's face looked as if it was covered with gold powder. His body went limp as he supported Shao Qi. Tell everyone in the High Duke's public house to return to the residence. They're not allowed to leave. Wait for me to wake up. As he spoke, blood was still gushing out. The void energy was unparalleled. Even with the protection of the divine light technique, his injuries were worsened. His organs were shattered, and there was no way to save him. He was definitely going to die. Shao Qi quickly channeled to help him heal but realized that his inner energy was surging violently. Her jade-like fingers that were pressing on his wrist were bounced off and felt slightly numb. He had such a vast inner energy, but he was surrounded by a deathly aura. Shao Qi's heart raced. She was not as calm as she usually was. What happened? Shao Qi asked. Chu Li said, "Send me to the Glories Will courtyard." Shao Qi quickly carried him and flew toward the Glories Will courtyard. Chu Li's eyes were bright, which was a stark contrast to his golden complexion. He was full of vitality. I was ambushed by the bishop of the Church of the Divine Blood in the Fu dynasty. I'm being chased by Wei Wuwei. Wei Wuwei might come here to force me to show myself. He can sense my location. He'll come after you? Very well. Shao Qi bit her red lips and said coldly. Her bright eyes flashed with coldness, and her killing intent boiled. Chu Li shook his head. Don't worry about him. I'll settle the score with him when I wake up. Tell everyone to retreat to the High Duke's public house to avoid unnecessary losses. Okay. Shao Qi nodded. The two entered the Glories Will courtyard. Xueling, who was dressed in a white tunic, came to greet them. When she saw Chu Li's strange behavior, her expression changed. Don't make a fuss. Chu Li waved his hand and smiled. With the help of Shao Qi and Xueling, he sat cross-legged under the Glories Will tree. He formed a hand seal, and a huge tree of life and death appeared in his mind. Don't worry, I'll be back. Chu Li smiled at Shao Qi and Xueling before he closed his eyes and passed away. Chapter 1386. Shao Qi pursed her lips and stared at Chu Li without moving. Xue stepped forward to check Chu Li's breathing. Tears streamed down her cheeks and dripped into the spirit soil before disappearing. Shao Qi stared at Chu Li and sighed. If he said he'll come back, he'll wake up. Xue wiped her tears and nodded. Shao Qi turned her head and said calmly, Guard here and don't let anyone come near. Yes. Xue nodded and stared at Chu Li without blinking. She hoped that he would open his eyes and smile at her. Shao Qi returned to Symphony Island first. Shao Shi was reading in the house. Both of them planned to go to Spirit Crane's Peak to cultivate in seclusion, but this happened before they left. Shao Qi felt that she could not hide it anymore. Shao Shi was shocked. He's dead? Shao Qi shook her head. He has the ability to revive the dead. He'll wake up. That's true. He won't die. Shao Shi nodded. She was confident in Chu Li. He was able to escape unscathed after encountering so many difficulties. Now that he had such powerful martial arts, it was even more impossible for him to die. Then I'll guard him too, Xiao Shi said. Let's see when he'll wake up. Xiao Qi nodded and brought her to Glory's Will courtyard. She then found Xiao Taiying, and used the High Duke's order to send a message to all protectors of the public house to return to the public house within 2 days. No protectors could disobey the High Duke's order. Wei Wuwei quietly waited outside the formation. He stared for a day and felt that Chu Li should be dead. He could not withstand Master's blood jade palm. Such a powerful master could be said to be the #1 person below the Ji dynasty's enlightened master, but he had died so silently. Apart from feeling delighted, there was also a bit of pity in his heart. He felt that he should find Chu Li's corpse and cut off his head. Only by cutting off his head would it be considered a true death. He had been walking around for a day, and still could not find the existence of the formation. He was very unwilling to give up. This formation was really brilliant. He wondered which powerful person from the Ji dynasty set it up. He decided to break the formation and find Chu Li. He disappeared in a flash. After a while, he reappeared with 2 formation-breaking talismans and threw them into the air. 2 drops of blood landed on the formation-breaking talismans and disappeared in the blink of an eye. A dazzling red light shot out in all directions, condensing into a red cloud in the distance. The red cloud flickered with light, as if it was about to come to life. Pop! Like the sound of a pebble being thrown into a lake, the red cloud spread out in an instant, like a rising tide slowly spreading on the beach, spreading into the distance and disappearing. Suddenly, the scenery in front of him changed greatly. The originally flat forest turned out to be a towering and lonely mountain peak. The mountain peak was overgrown with green bamboos, and when a gust of wind blew, the green waves surged. It was a very spectacular sight. Wei Wuwei had no time to admire this beautiful scenery. Like a wisp of smoke, he circled around the mountain peak from bottom to top. Finally, he stopped somewhere in the bamboo forest and stared at the blackened blood on the ground. He bent down and reached out to wipe the black blood soil. Then, he gently sniffed it and felt the aura of the blood jade palm. With this kind of blood, Chu Li would definitely die. It was even more poisonous than the most lethal poison. He squinted his eyes and sensed for a moment. He got up and looked around. Chu Li should not be in this mountain. Even if he was dead, the aura of the blood jade palm in the blood would not dissipate. He could still feel it. It seemed like Chu Li had escaped. He frowned and pondered. He was annoyed. How could he survive after being hit by Master's blood jade palm? After a while, he left the mountain and walked east like a wisp of smoke, entering the Ji dynasty. He had been desperately cultivating. Even when he left the mountain, he only wandered around the martial arts world of the Fu dynasty and made a name for himself. As for the Ji dynasty, he did not care about it and was too lazy to step foot there. This was his first time stepping into the Ji dynasty's territory. He asked someone about the location of the public house, so he used his light body technique to travel quickly. He wanted to rush to the public house as soon as possible to see if Chu Li was dead. If he was not dead, he would kill him before he recovered. In the evening, he entered a restaurant in Green Mountain Town. Green Mountain Town was where the Ren public house was. He was passing by, but he also wanted to take a look at the Ren public house. He wanted to find out the situation of the Ji public house, so that he could deal with the public house calmly. After a day's journey, he was hungry and thirsty. So, he found a bustling restaurant and sat at a table on the second floor. He called the waiter and ordered some dishes. Then, he drank wine while listening to the people talking. "I heard that the lady has returned to the public house," a young man in martial arts attire said excitedly. There were 3 other young men in martial arts attire sitting at the table. They had swords on their waists and their eyes were shining. "The lady has been staying in Fairy's capital for a while. It was not easy for her to return to the public house. Another young man shook his head and sighed. Women are not inferior to men. The lady is now the commander of the Secret Guardians Hall. She is really amazing. Exactly. A horse-faced young man said proudly. She has firmly suppressed Chuli. Back then, Chuli was only a centurion. The public house was so arrogant and arrogant. Now they are embarrassed. Haha, once the lady became the commander, Chuli was immediately kicked out of the Secret Guardians Hall. How satisfying. Satisfying, they should have kicked Chuli out. Chuli is now suppressed by the lady. He can only stay in the imperial residence obediently and cultivate in isolation all year round. He must be unsatisfied and wants to suppress the lady. Exactly, everyone was discussing. Their words were all about the lady's limelight suppressing Chuli. Chuli could not make a comeback. Wei Wu-wei listened with great interest. There was actually a woman who could suppress Chuli? He really wanted to see for himself. He got up and came to the side of the table. He closed fist saluted and smiled. My surname is Wei. May I know which lady the four of you are talking about? The four of them saw that he was elegant and dignified. It was obvious that he was a person of high status. They did not dare to neglect him. One of them smiled and said, "The lady is naturally the lady of the Ren public house." Another person said, "Lu above, your own below." This Lady Lu is so powerful? Wei Wu-wei smiled. Can she defeat Chuli? Of course. The four of them quickly nodded. Not only is the lady skilled in martial arts, but she is also wise. Although Chuli is a man, he is completely restrained and can't make a comeback. Back then, under the leadership of the lady, our Rin public house defeated the public house. If we didn't show mercy, we would have been defeated long ago. This Lady Lu's martial arts is also better than Chuli's. Wei Wu-wei frowned. That's impossible, right? These words made the four of them a little unhappy. They frowned and looked at him. Young Master Wei, who are you and what is your relationship with Chuli? Wei Wu-wei said, I'm friends with Chuli. Chuli's friends. The four of them stared at him with gloomy faces. That makes him our enemy. Wei Wu-wei smiled indifferently. He shook his head and said nothing. If you don't want to say, then forget it. But I still think that it's impossible for this Lady Lu to defeat Chuli. Chuli's martial arts is very powerful. Shut up. The four of them shouted. They pointed at him and scolded. Which corner did you crawl out from? You're full of nonsense. Get out. Wei Wu-wei's face suddenly darkened. The murderous aura around him was faintly discernible, and the surrounding temperature suddenly dropped. Chapter 1387. Wei Wu-wei stared coldly at the four of them. If it was any other time, these people would not be qualified to stand in front of him, let alone talk to him. They really did not know their place and were really despicable. The four young men were stared at by him. Not only were they not afraid, they were even angrier. The young man with a long and narrow face stepped forward and puffed out his chest. Boy, do you want to fight? He had long been annoyed by Wei Wu-wei's condescending attitude and wanted to slap Wei Wu-wei to shatter his pretense. Wei Wu-wei frowned and did not say anything. He just stared at him. He felt that if he fought, he would lower his status. Fighting with these people, who were not even grandmasters, would only dirty his hands. He really did not want to deal with them. He suddenly smiled, shook his head, turned around, and wanted to return to his table. Want to leave? The long-faced young man put his hand on Wei Wu-wei's shoulder and wanted to pull him back. You want to leave without making things clear? How dare you? Wei Wu-wei shouted and turned his head to slap him. Slap. A clear slap was heard. The long-faced young man flew up and spun 3 times in the air. Bang! The chair was crushed into pieces. Wei Wu-wei frowned and stared at the long-faced young man in disgust. He scoffed. Any random person dared to slap him on the shoulder and reach out to him. It was really a case of a tiger being bullied by dogs. You dare to fight in the city? The other 3 young men cried out. They also felt Wei Wuwei's strength, but they were very calm and fearless. They were all citizens of Green Mountain Town and usually did not go out of the town, so they were not afraid of the martial arts masters in the town. They would even deliberately provoke these martial arts masters when they had the chance. Due to the prestige of the Run Public House, the martial arts masters who entered Green Mountain Town had to abide by the rules of the Run Public House. They did not dare to make a move in Green Mountain Town, especially against the civilians. Otherwise, the Run Public House would hunt them down until they were dead. Wei Wuwei coldly stared at the 3 men. "Shut up." The 3 quickly shut up and stared at him in shock. They then looked at the young man on the ground. The corner of the long-faced young man's mouth was bruised, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. 3 teeth were in the blood. Looking at the teeth in the pool of blood and the numbness on one side of his face, the long-faced man was instantly filled with rage. There was no other thought in his mind except to kill. He must kill this fellow. Die. The horse-faced man stood up, drew his sword, and stabbed at Wei Wuwei. Wei Wuwei's sword-like eyebrows furrowed as he lightly struck out with his palm. The sword broke free from the horse-faced man's hand and shot into the roof. The hilt trembled violently like a wriggling snake. Scram! Wei Wuwei coldly glanced at the 4 of them. The expressions of the 3 youths changed slightly. They were a little fearful. It seemed like they had met someone who didn't care about his life. As the saying goes, those who are arrogant are afraid of those who don't care about their lives. It was best not to provoke them. The horse-faced man's mind was already filled with rage. Not only did the sword leave his hand, it didn't calm him down. Instead, it made him even angrier. Under the impulse, his entire body seemed to be on fire, and he rushed forward to slap Wei Wuwei's face. Courting death. Wei Wuwei was enraged. This ant-like fellow actually dared to provoke him time and time again. It seemed that he really couldn't be merciful. He suddenly slammed his palm down. The horse-faced man instantly froze and looked down at his chest. Wei Wuwei's jade-like right palm had already hit his heart. A strange force shook his body and his chest hurt slightly. Then, darkness surged over like a tide. He instantly widened his eyes and fell down, dead. "You dare to kill!" The other 3 young men cried out and stared at him angrily. "You're dead. You dare to kill people in Green Mountain City, you must die." "Noisy." Wei Wuwei frowned. His body flashed like a ghost, and 3 palms had already landed on the 3 young men's chests. All of them fell to the ground and died. Wei Wuwei looked at the 4 corpses and smiled happily. He had finally vented his anger. Initially, he thought that he needed to keep a low profile in the Ji dynasty to avoid attracting the attention of an enlightened master. However, the more he tolerated it, the more arrogant these lowly people became. He really couldn't bear it anymore, and there was no need to bear it anymore. An enlightened master wouldn't target him. In the situation just now, even if he knew he would attract the attention of an enlightened master, he still had to attack. He really couldn't bear it. The surrounding people were dumbfounded and forgot to speak. They hadn't seen this scene for many years. "Murder!" Someone reacted and cried out in shock. Then, the surrounding people started to scream, and the restaurant was suddenly in an uproar. Wei Wuwei frowned and stared at the people around him. He felt that it was strange for them to make a fuss out of nothing. Fighting in a restaurant without saying anything, was it not normal for a few people to die? What was there to be surprised about? He glanced at the 4 corpses. He originally wanted to behead them, but in the end, he was too lazy to do it. Killing a grandmaster was already this bad. To these lowly people, it was really not worth it. Even if they didn't die, it was not a big deal. He turned back to his table and took a sip of wine. The surrounding people stared at his every move in a daze. Amit Ba Buddha! Amidst the mighty chanting of Buddha, a bald monk pushed through the crowd and approached him. He pressed his palms together and said, "I am Fa Ming. Almsgiver, don't you think it's too harsh?" Wei Wuwei frowned and stared at Fa Ming. Fa Ming's figure was small and skinny. The gray robe he wore fluttered in the wind, like a child wearing an adult's clothes. He shook his head and sighed. "Almsgiver, your actions are against the harmony of heaven. How can you kill people so easily?" Noisy. Wei Wuwei's eyes were like lightning. He glanced at the crowd and finally landed on Fa Ming. He said coldly, "Little monk, you're so nosy. Are you tired of living? Shut up." Fa Ming said, "Almsgiver, you should go to the Ren public house and ask for forgiveness. The Ren public house will never forgive you for killing people in Green Hill Town. They will definitely kill you." He stepped forward to check on the injuries of the 4 young men. His face was solemn. He pressed his palms together and chanted the name of Buddha. Then, he began to murmur the Buddhist scriptures to release the souls of the 4 people. The sound of the scriptures was clearly heard by everyone. When the crowd heard the clear and calm sound of the scriptures, they calmed down. Those who practiced martial arts knew that this monk was very powerful and was definitely not an ordinary person. "Is it the master of the Tempest Temple?" someone asked in a low voice. Fa Ming pressed his palms together and closed his eyes to chant the scriptures. He did not answer. "It must be the Tempest Temple," someone said. When Wei Wuwei heard the scriptures, he faintly felt that his blood was not flowing smoothly. It was as if he had met his natural enemy. The disciples of the Church of the Divine Blood hated this kind of musical assassination technique the most. It was the best way to restrain their bloody garment divine power. When he heard Fa Ming's chanting, he did not calm down. Instead, his killing intent surged. "Shut up." Wei Wuwei frowned and said in a low voice, "If you continue chanting, I'll let you accompany them." Fa Ming acted as if he did not hear anything. He lowered his head and continued chanting. The anger in Wei Wuwei's heart soared to his head. Ever since he entered Green Hill Town, everything went against his will. He was used to being the most powerful person in the Fu dynasty. Everywhere he went, people were cautious and cautious. They did not dare to show any disrespect to him. However, the people of Green Hill Town did not respect him at all. Instead, they targeted him everywhere. He could not stand it anymore. "Go to hell." Wei Wuwei slammed his palm toward Fa Ming. Fa Ming's body moved horizontally and barely avoided the palm. Wei Wuwei's palm seemed to have missed, but at the last moment, he sped up again. It was as if he was pushed by someone and finally hit Fa Ming. Chapter 1388. Stop! A loud voice boomed like thunder. Everyone felt their ears ringing and their blood shaking. They were so upset that they wanted to vomit. They swayed and could not stand steadily. Everything in front of them was shaking and they could not see clearly. 2 dark green figures shot into the restaurant and stood in front of Wei Wuwei. They stared at him with their hands on their long blades. "Who are you?" Wei Wuwei frowned and waved his hand impatiently. He wanted to see if Fa Ming was dead or alive. If he attacked, he would definitely kill him. "How dare you!" The 2 middle-aged men in green stepped forward and took 2 positions. They slowly pulled out their blades. Fighting is prohibited in Green Mountain Town. Anyone who violates the rules will be killed. "How arrogant!" Wei Wuwei said coldly. He disappeared in a flash, and the next moment, he flew out of the window and landed on the street outside. The street was brightly lit with lanterns everywhere. It was bustling with people coming and going. Everyone stopped in their tracks and looked at Fa Ming, who was slowly getting up. There was blood at the corner of his mouth. He was seriously injured. The blood jade palm was powerful. Although Fa Ming was a grandmaster and could protect himself in the Ji dynasty, he could not withstand Wei Wuwei's palm. "You do have some ability." Wei Wuwei's purple robe fluttered as he landed in front of Fa Ming. There were not many people in the world who could take a hit from him and not die. Fa Ming's cultivation level was average, but he had some ability to take a beating. I am a disciple of the Tempest Temple. I have cultivated the sentient menace, Fa Ming said slowly. His face flashed with golden light. He looked solemn and holy like a golden Luhan standing there. He felt Wei Wuwei's murderous intent and knew he could not escape. He immediately activated his secret skill. The Tempest Temple's disciple must die too. Wei Wuwei shouted and struck with his palm. Stop! Ding! Ding! The two middle-aged men appeared in front of Fa Ming and brandished their sabers to block Wei Wuwei's palm strike. However, their sabers were sent flying, and their expressions changed drastically. They quickly retreated, wanting to escape. They could feel Wei Wuwei's violent internal energy, and they knew they were no match for him. Furthermore, Wei Wuwei was a ruthless and merciless killer. Only by dodging would they be able to survive. You dare to meddle in my business? Die! Wei Wuwei disappeared in a flash and caught up to the two. His left and right palms struck their chests. The two of them faced upwards and spurted out arrows of blood. They flew 100 feet away and crashed into a wonton stall. They lay motionless on the ground, dead. Fa Ming turned around and ran. He was like a streak of golden light that flashed in front of everyone. In the blink of an eye, he had run more than 100 meters away. He turned at the end of the street. Everyone watched with wide eyes, hoping that Fa Ming would be able to escape from this killing god. Wei Wuwei took a step forward, blocking Fa Ming's path. Ah, me. Tua. Buddha. Fa Ming chanted the name of Buddha and slowly pushed out his palm. This Buddhist chant was mighty and mighty, echoing in the night sky for a long time. It was as if all the Buddhas in the sky were chanting Buddhist chants, solemn and dignified. Bang! Fa Ming's palm, which seemed to be covered in gold powder, collided with Wei Wuwei's white, jade-like palm, producing a muffled sound. The surrounding people were all sent flying like a hurricane. The dirt and fruit pits on the ground were all swept up, and the green brick floor was completely clean. Fa Ming did not move. His face shone with a golden radiance, and blood slowly flowed from the corner of his mouth. Amit Bao! He put his hands together and sat cross-legged on the ground, chanting the name of Buddha again. His voice became weaker and weaker until it finally stopped moving. He had already passed away. Wei Wuwei sneered, very dissatisfied with Fa Ming's actions. The surrounding people couldn't help but feel deep veneration. This little monk was so young, but he had the demeanor of an eminent monk. No wonder he was a brilliant disciple of the great Thunder Tune Temple. It was a pity that he passed away here. They couldn't help but angrily glare at Wei Wuwei. Wei Wuwei faced the fiery gazes of the crowd and smiled slightly. He felt indescribably comfortable. This was the kind of gaze he wanted. This was his dignity. He floated back into the restaurant through the broken window. The people who were looking down from the window couldn't help but shrink back, hurriedly avoiding him. Wei Wuwei calmly returned to his seat and took a sip of wine. The crowd was silent and didn't dare to talk. They hadn't met such a madman in a long time. He was definitely someone who was going to die. It wasn't worth arguing with him. It was better not to provoke him and not drag them down with him before he died. The entire restaurant fell into silence. The sound of bowls and chopsticks colliding was especially ear-piercing. Wei Wuwei casually glanced at the crowd and slowly sipped his wine. The crowd avoided his gaze and didn't stand up to leave. They wanted to see this guy's fate. After Wei Wuwei finished his cup, the sound of clothes fluttering could be heard. Then, 6 old men appeared in the restaurant. They were all wearing dark green robes. Some had sabers and some had swords. They went forward and surrounded Wei Wuwei. Go! They didn't say a word and attacked Wei Wuwei with their sabers and swords. Their sabers and swords emitted a cold aura. The crowd all retreated to the corner to watch the show. Ding 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 ding. Pung 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 pung. The 6 old men were all sent flying. They crashed through the window and fell onto the street dead on the spot. Wei Wuwei lightly dusted his purple robe and calmly said, "Waiter, why aren't the dishes here yet?" "They're coming." The waiter, who was hiding far away, was shocked and stuttered. "Hurry up," Wei Wuwei said in a low voice. Yes, right away." The waiter's face was pale. The surrounding people left with heavy hearts. They felt that the world was about to change. This crazy guy was so powerful. This time, the High Duke's public house might not be able to kill him. If they couldn't, then the rules of Green Mountain Town would be broken. The prestige of the High Duke's public house would be gone. In the future, Green Mountain Town wouldn't be so peaceful. Looking at the empty restaurant, Wei Wuwei chuckled and shook his head. A remote and desolate village was indeed a remote and desolate village. The number of experts here was limited. As long as the 2 heavenly deities didn't appear, he would be invincible. He felt indescribably carefree. He looked at the waiter who was carrying the dishes over and said, "Don't worry. I'm not crazy. I won't kill people for no reason." Yes. When the waiter heard what he said, he was shocked. After listening to his words, he tried to squeeze a smile. He carefully put down the 4 dishes and left in a hurry. Wei Wuwei stared at the 4 dishes. He shook his head and began to eat. After that, no masters came. The Ren public house seemed to be so scared that they retreated. This made Wei Wuwei despise them even more. He felt that the High Duke's public house was only so powerful. They bullied the weak and feared the strong. After the meal, he was too lazy to explore the Ren public house. He directly passed through Green Mountain Town and walked towards the E public house. The E public house was not worth mentioning at all. He could just kill his way to their door and kill Chuli. No one followed him along the way. It seemed that the Ren public house was really scared. The Tempest Temple did not respond either. This made him vigilant. The High Duke's public house had lost a few grandmasters. It was reasonable that they did not dare to chase after him. Otherwise, if all the masters were killed, the big High Duke's public house would be finished. They could only endure the humiliation. The Tempest Temple was the #1 sect in the Great Ji dynasty. They would not swallow this humiliation. They must send people to kill him. Chapter 1389. As the sun set, the surroundings were dyed red. Lu Yurong's face was covered by a white veil, revealing only her clear eyes. She looked around, her white robe fluttering in the wind as she said, "Fa Yuan, your junior brother Fa Ming was also a powerful figure. It's a pity that he was killed just like that." Fa Yuan's gray robe fluttered as he sighed. Junior brother Fa Ming has a profound dermic base. I didn't expect this to happen and for him to enter the Grandmaster's boundary so quickly. Lu Yurong chuckled. He's a rising star. He won't surpass you, right? It's highly possible. Fa Yuan nodded slowly. His handsome face turned solemn. He suddenly stopped in the distance and saw Wei Wuwei, who was resting by the side of the forest. Lu Yurong asked, "Did you find out who he is?" "These are the masters that I've borrowed from the other public houses." She turned her head to look at the 20 or so elders that she had brought with her. She shook her head and sighed. "If we still can't take him down with so many grandmasters, the reputation of the public houses will be completely gone." The death of 7 grandmasters had indeed damaged the House of High Duke's vitality. She immediately contacted the other houses of High Dukes to ask for emergency help and send their top-notch masters over to help. In this kind of matter, even if there were conflicts, they would still stand together and send their masters over to help. The rules of the public houses were ironclad. If one public house broke it, the other public houses would also be shaken. The Ji dynasty's martial arts masters would become restless and restless. It would take a lot of effort to suppress it. Therefore, once there were signs of this, they must suppress it no matter what. They must not allow it to happen and prevent the martial arts masters from getting lucky. If I'm not wrong, this person should be Wei Wuwei from the Church of the Divine Blood. Fa Yuan sighed. He's a famous top-notch master. We might not be able to stop him today. Why did he come to the Ji dynasty? Lu Yurong frowned. Chu Li is really something. Why did he have to go into isolated cultivation at this time? Fa Yuan said, Miss Lu, you know how powerful Wei Wuwei is. Although we have more people, I'm not confident. Don't overestimate others and underestimate yourself. Lu Yurong scoffed. No matter how strong he is, he's only one person and he's so young. How strong can he be? She said this insincerely. Wei Wuwei's reputation was not just for show. He had earned his reputation by killing people one by one. He was the Fu dynasty's famous god of slaughter and had killed countless grandmasters. Fa Yuan sighed. If Brother Chu were here, I would feel more at ease. Lu Yurong glared at him without saying a word. She felt the same way. If Chu Li had been there, she would not have felt so guilty and anxious. Wei Wuwei's reputation was too great, and she was not confident that she could stop him, let alone kill him. What was worse was that, if they really killed Wei Wuwei, the consequences would be unpredictable. The Church of the Divine Blood would definitely retaliate. The strength of the Church of the Divine Blood was not something that the High Duke's public house could compare to. Just thinking about it made one's heart turn cold. Lu Yurong stared at Wei Wuwei in the distance and shook her head. She was in no hurry to step forward. The few masters behind her suddenly turned around and stared at a woman in white who was floating towards them. It was Xueling. Xueling's face was like a beautiful piece of jade. Her body exuded a cold aura, like a lotus flower on a snowy mountain. Lu Yurong waved her hand and everyone made way for her. Xueling came closer and closed-fist saluted. Greetings, Lady Lu and Master Fa Yuan. Lu Yurong nodded while Fa Yuan pressed his palms together. Xueling said, Lady Xiao asked me to inform everyone not to fight Wei Wuwei. Lu Yurong frowned. What does Xiao Qi think? Xueling shook her head. Lady Xiao said that Wei Wuwei cannot be defeated. Then she wants us to avoid him. Lu Yurong said impatiently. Does she know what Wei Wuwei did? Lady Xiao already knows. But the situation is stronger than the person. Wei Wuwei's martial arts is too strong, and no one can defeat him. We can't just die for nothing, so she asked us not to fight him. What about Chu Li? Lu Yurong asked. Fa Yuan said, Is Brother Chu still in isolated cultivation? Xueling frowned and looked around. Lu Yurong and Fa Yuan looked at each other and shook their heads. Say it, there are no outsiders. Master is indeed in isolated cultivation, Xueling said softly. Lady Xiao wants to wait for Master to come out before dealing with Wei Wuwei. Lu Yurong asked, When will he come out? Xueling shook her head lightly. Fa Yuan said, Can Brother Chu defeat Wei Wuwei once he comes out? Yes, Xueling nodded. Lu Yurong scoffed. You talk big. Wei Wuwei is the top master in the Fu dynasty. Not many can defeat him, but Chu Li can't. Thank you for sending the letter. Thank Xiao Qi for me. Xueling heard her tone and knew that she would not listen to Lady Xiao. She said helplessly, Wei Wuwei is here to look for Master. What grudge does Chu Li have with Wei Wuwei? Lu Yurong asked. Xueling shook her head. Forget it, you can go back. Fa Yuan and I have to try. Lu Yurong waved her hand. Fa Yuan bowed. Lady Xiao, please go back. Although everything is fated, there must be karma. This is Brother Fa Ming's fate, we can't not help him. All right. Xueling closed fist saluted and fluttered away. Fa Yuan retracted his gaze from Xueling's graceful silhouette and looked at Wei Wuwei in the distance. Lu Yurong said, Fa Yuan, let's not let them fight. Let's work together and use our secret skills. If we can't win, we can run into Chongming Town and let the public house protect us. Fa Yuan smiled. Lady Lu wants to force Brother Chu to come out? Humph, he might be watching from the side and watching us make a fool of ourselves. Lu Yurong scoffed. Fa Yuan shook his head and smiled. Brother Chu won't do that. That might not be the case. He only comes out at the crucial moment to turn the tide. Lu Yurong said. Fa Yuan laughed. He stared into the distance and nodded. Then let's meet this young lord. Lu Yurong nodded. Suddenly, a bright light flashed in the sky and fell instantly. It drilled into her by Hui acupoint. Her body was suddenly covered in a layer of bright light. It was as if she was standing beside a lake and was reflected by the clear water. Fa Yuan put his palms together and chanted the name of Buddha. Ba. When the name of Buddha fell, he was already solemn. His face began to shine with a purple brilliance. His gaze became calm, compassionate and peaceful. It was as if a Luohan had descended to the world. His entire body seemed to be made of purple bronze. There was no sign of flesh and blood. Like a flash of light, the two of them appeared in front of Wei Wuwei in an instant. Wei Wuwei's eyes were sharp and his ears were very good. He heard what they said. Facing the two of them, he laughed and went forward. Bang, 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 bang. He dealt with one person with one hand, and the muffled sounds of collisions rang out continuously. The three of them were fighting each other head-on, and there were no tricks used. It was all about cultivation. Lu Yurong and Fa Yuan both used their secret skills, but Wei Wuwei did not. He was still able to suppress the two of them. The blood jade palm was extremely strong. It continuously eroded the two's internal organs. However, the two of them were in the state of secret skills. They were extremely strong and had a strong resistance against the blood jade palm. Although they were injured, they were only minor injuries. Chapter 1390. As soon as he finished speaking, his white palms turned red again, as if he had applied a layer of rouge on them. His power increased tremendously. As his palms turned red, his speed and power increased tremendously. The two of them could not breathe and were forced to retreat until they were in front of the 20 masters. Of these 20 experts, 6 were monks wearing gray monk robes, while the other 14 were old men. When they saw that Lu Yurong and Fa Yuan were still being suppressed, they could not help but step forward to help. Bam, 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 bam. As soon as they rushed forward, they were sent flying by Wei Wuwei's palm energy. It was like an innate master meeting a grandmaster. They could not resist at all. They staggered and fell to the ground, blood gushing out of their mouth. They were injured. Lu Yurong shouted, "All of you, return to Chongming Town and the public house." Yes. Everyone nodded helplessly. They were a little disheartened. They thought that they could help, but once they fought, they realized that Wei Wuwei lived up to his name. They could not even take one hit from him. They were too weak and could not help at all. Fa Yuan also said, "Brother Fa Hua, all of you should go as well." Ba Buddha. The 6 monks pressed their palms together and chanted. All of a sudden, golden rays shot out from their faces. Following that, the golden rays slowly spread out and covered their entire bodies like golden powder. Their hands, feet, faces, and necks seemed to have been coated with golden powder as they transformed into golden arhat. Fa Yuan shook his head helplessly. The 6 monks rushed forward again to meet Wei Wuwei's blood jade palm. Bam, 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 bam. They were sent flying again and stumbled 100 feet away. Blood gushed out of the corners of their mouth. Although they were injured, it did not affect their combat power. Fa Yuan sighed, "Brother Fa Hua." The 6 monks flew forward again. In the air, they pressed their palms together like a circle and spread out violently, turning into a golden circle that enveloped Wei Wuwei. Wei Wuwei scoffed and suddenly leaped up to meet the golden circle, his palms striking out. Bam, 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 bam. The 6 of them spun violently and met his palms one by one. The golden circle expanded for a moment before shrinking back and continuing to trap him. Wei Wuwei frowned. After he floated down to the ground, the 6 of them floated down as well and continuously struck out with their palms. Wei Wuwei could see the secret behind it. The cultivation bases of the 6 of them had already merged into one, and their bodies were incomparably strong, as if they were not made of flesh and blood. The destructive power of the blood jade palm was limited when it entered their bodies, and it was actually able to entangle him for a while. Fa Yuan stood outside the circle and waved both his hands. Streaks of petrifying finger strikes were mixed with the spear finger strike. Lu Yurong, on the other hand, stood at the side with a frown, trying to find Wei Wuwei's weakness. However, Wei possessed a wondrous art, but she couldn't do anything to Wei Wuwei because of her cultivation. This made her feel a sense of despair, and she kept thinking of retreating. This Wei Wuwei was simply a monster, and she couldn't defeat him no matter what. Bam 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 bam. The 6 monks suddenly flew out. The circle that had been formed was finally forcefully broken by Wei Wuwei. The 6 of them fell to the ground and could not get up. Their injuries were too severe. Wei Wuwei laughed out loud. What a great Tempest Temple! You have some skills, but unfortunately this is all you've got. Amit Ba. Fa Yuan slowly chanted the name of Buddha and pounced forward again. The corner of his mouth was gushing with blood, and he was unknowingly injured. The blood jade palm was extremely insidious, and even if Fa Yuan activated his secret skill, he still could not escape. Lu Yurong's face was covered with a white veil, and no blood could be seen. Her movements were no longer as fast as before. Although the Empyrean fairy power was amazing, her cultivation level was still a far cry from Wei Wuwei's. It was already a miracle that she could hold on until now. The 3 of them fought again. Lu Yurong and Fa Yuan struggled to hold on, but they could be crushed at any time. They could retreat back to Chongming Town and hide in the public house. Unknowingly, they had already been forced back to the south gate of Chongming Town. They turned their heads to look at the south gate, and suddenly gritted their teeth and forced themselves to stop. Xue Ling and Xiao Shi sat in front of the Glory's Will Tree, and stared at Chu Li without blinking. Chu Li was like a statue, sitting with his legs crossed. There was no breath, as if he was completely dead. The 2 women firmly believed that Chu Li could come back from the dead. They stared at him, wanting to see the moment when he came back from the dead, and how he would come back to life. Xiao Qi had been helping Xiao Taiying with the public house's matters. All the protectors of the public house had returned. It was the order of the High Duke, so all the protectors wanted to know what happened. They soon found out about what happened in Green Mountain Town, and what happened outside of Chongming Town. They were all angry and wanted to help. The Yi public house and the Run public house had a grudge, but they were both public houses, and the rules of the public house could not be broken. This Wei Wuwei must be killed, or else the dignity of the public house would be destroyed. However, this Wei Wuwei was so arrogant that he killed his way into Chongming Town. It was obvious that he wanted to break into the public house. The public house summoned all the protectors back because they were afraid that they would encounter Wei Wuwei and be killed. This made them feel touched and angry. Chu Li's soul was lodged in a strange space, on a tree of life and death. It was as if he had transformed into a scripture of life and death, rooted in a strange place between heaven and earth. He looked down at the changes in the world, the vicissitudes of life, and everything was changing. Nothing was eternal. Everything was going through the process of life and death, and from death to life, the cycle of life and death, the cycle of life and death, the vicissitudes of life and death. When he slowly woke up, he felt that he had experienced hundreds of years. His state of mind had become calm and vicissitudes of life. He was not like a young man, but more like an old man who had lived for hundreds of years. When he opened his eyes, everything he saw was indescribably beautiful and lovely, especially when there were two beautiful women in front of him. "Master!" Xueling called out in surprise. Chu Li smiled, but he did not remove the hand seal. He was still sitting with his legs crossed. His chest suddenly became bright, as if there was a white light hidden under his clothes, illuminating his body and clothes. This white light slowly rose, as if there was an invisible hand holding the light up into the air. At this moment it could be seen that this white light was emitted by a string of prayer bead. This string of prayer beads was the one that Chu Li obtained from the stargazing pavilion. It looked ragged and was missing a bead. The string of prayer beads looked like it would break at any time. He originally wanted to change the string of prayer beads and string it again. However, his intuition stopped him. It seemed that this string that was about to break was extremely important to the prayer bead. He could not change it, so he did not change it. This way, the prayer beads were not suitable to be worn on his hand. He could only wrap it up and keep it in his pocket. At this moment, this string of prayer beads turned into a ball of light and slowly rose into the air. It stopped moving, like a bright moon hanging low. Xueling and Xiao Shi stared at this ball of light. After a while, the prayer beads were still hanging in the air. Xueling regained her senses and quickly went to get the porridge. Chu Li closed his eyes and chanted in a low voice, as if he did not see the abnormality of the prayer beads. Chapter 1391. Time passed slowly. Chu Li sat under the tree with his palms pressed together as he chanted Buddhist scriptures. He had no intention of getting up at all. It was as if he was going to sit there forever. Xueling looked at him worriedly and turned to look at Xiao Shi. Xiao Shi shook her head. "Don't disturb him." "What's wrong with Master?" Xueling asked softly. Xiao Shi shook her head. She did not know what was going on, but she knew that she could not disturb him. Looking at Chu Li's appearance was not a bad thing, and it was rare for him to have such an unusual appearance. She had never seen anything like this before, and such an unusual appearance usually meant that she had gained something. Xueling said, "Master, do you need any help? It seems to be resisting something." She could tell that Chu Li was not at ease. Although his eyes were closed and he looked dignified, she could see the seriousness between his brows. Perhaps he was going through some difficulties and needed their help. However, it seemed that the second young mistress didn't want to disturb him. She might miss the opportunity and put the young master in danger. At that moment, the sound of clothes fluttering could be heard. She quickly turned around and saw Shao Qi fluttering over. She stared at the light above Chu Li's head and frowned without saying a word. Xiao Shi turned to look at Xiao Qi. "Is everything all right in the residence?" Xiao Qi stared at Chu Li with her bright eyes and said calmly, "It's still considered stable, but there's still an air of injustice. I don't know how powerful it is. These people really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth." Shao Shi scoffed. "They don't know how to be kind." "What is he?" Xiao Qi frowned and asked. Xiao Shi shook her head and said, "Who knows what he's up to? Let's wait and see." Shao Qi nodded gently. "They've gotten used to having everything go their way, so they've developed the overbearing attitude of, those who submit to me will prosper, and those who oppose me will perish. It's a good thing that Wei Wuwei is here this time. He'll let them know how powerful we are." She had already noticed that there was something wrong with the protector's mentality in the public house. As the public house became stronger and Chu Li's reputation grew, the people in the martial arts world within the boundaries of the public house became more obedient. The protectors, on the other hand, were filled with arrogance. It was as if no one dared to provoke them, and no one could provoke them. If this went on, she didn't know what kind of trouble they would get into, which made her faintly worried. Shao Shi asked, "Could Lu Yurong and Fa Yuan have been killed by Wei Wuwei?" Shao Qi frowned and shook her head. She had seen Wei Wuwei from the top of Chongming Town. She could feel his tyrannical strength from afar. He was truly unfathomable. Fa Yuan and Lu Yurong were definitely not his match. It was hard to tell if they would be killed by Wei Wuwei. She stared at Chu Li and raised her voice. Do you need help? Chu Li slowly opened his eyes, which shone with a golden light. No one dared to look at him directly. He kept chanting and gently shook his head. Then, he closed his eyes again. Shao Qi, Shao Shi, and the other two ladies let out a sigh of relief. It seemed like he was fine, but it was not easy either. It was obvious that he was having a hard time dealing with it and needed to focus. Bam 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 bam. Wei Wuwei countered Lu Yurong and Fa Yuan with his palms. The three of them fought faster and fiercer. Only three shadows could be seen tangling together, but their moves could not be seen clearly. A lot of people had gathered in the distance. They did not dare to get close. The battle between grandmasters was earth-shattering. If they got close, they would definitely die. However, the battle between grandmasters was a great attraction. It was a rare opportunity for people in the martial arts world to watch. Watching a great battle would allow them to experience the power of a grandmaster. The use of inner energy and the understanding of moves were difficult for ordinary martial arts masters to achieve. Watching a battle was extremely beneficial. It was something that could only be encountered by chance. Looking at the situation in the field and the 20 masters lying on the ground, the surrounding people were amazed by Wei Wuwei's power. Where did this master come from? He's too powerful. Do you know the people who are fighting? Someone shouted proudly. I know the two of them. One is the lady of the Ren public house, Miss Lu Yurong. The other is the #1 youth master of the Tempest Temple, Fa Yuan. The two of them joined forces, but they still couldn't defeat that guy. He's too powerful. Lu Yurong? Isn't she the sworn enemy of the public house? The lady of the Ren public house is not a simple woman. I heard that she's the commander of the Secret Guardians Hall. She has power over the world. Then why did she come to the public house? I know. Someone quickly came forward and lowered his voice. I heard that the person she's fighting with killed someone in Green Hill Town. Think about it. Killing someone in Green Hill Town is no different from killing someone in Chongming Town. The High Duke's public house won't let him go. They must kill him. Oh my, how dare he kill someone in Green Hill Town? Nothing is too strange in this big world. An old man shook his head and sighed. But this person has the ability to do whatever he wants. His martial arts is too strong. Lu Yurong and Fa Yuan are the top masters in the martial arts world. Other than Du Feng of the south and Chu Li of the north, they're the best. Where's Chief Chu? A young swordsman frowned and scoffed. They're fighting right in front of his house. Chief Chu isn't coming out. I heard that Chief Chu has been in isolated cultivation. Could it be that he's afraid and doesn't dare to come out? Another young swordsman sneered. I know the identity of the guy who's fighting two people at once. Who is it? Nearly 100 people looked over. More and more people gathered around them. Most of them had heard the news and rushed out from Chongming Town to watch the show. They stared over there and discussed in low voices. The young bishop of the Church of the Divine Blood, Wei Wuwei. The young swordsman said coldly. He's one of the top masters in the martial arts world of the Fu dynasty. He rarely has a worthy opponent. The Church of the Divine Blood of the Fu dynasty. Some people were confused while others had a slight change in expression. The young swordsman scoffed. Wei Wuwei has appeared. It's understandable that head Chief Chu isn't coming out. Shut up! The young swordsman shouted. Don't you dare slander Chief Chu. Whether it's slander or not is obvious. The young swordsman sneered. We've already fought all the way here. I don't believe that head Chief Chu hasn't heard the news. Also, look, where are the protectors of the public house? Haven't they all shrunk back like turtles? His words made everyone unable to refute him. Their faces turned ugly. It was so crowded outside of Chongming Town, but none of the protectors of the public house appeared. It was really unusual. No matter how they looked at it, they were afraid. Head Chief Chu should have heard the news and rushed over. However, he did not appear. He said that he was in isolated cultivation. It was obvious that he wanted to avoid Wei Wuwei. Wei Wuwei's identity was not to be trifled with. It was understandable, but he still felt uncomfortable. "We're here." A long shout was suddenly heard from afar. A group of people rushed over like a gust of wind. They arrived behind Lu Yurong and Fa Yuan. There were more than 40 martial arts masters. Their eyes flashed and their auras were released. It was obvious that they were martial arts masters. Lu Yurong turned her head to look. She waved her hand and said, "You guys go to the public house. Don't fight." The old man at the front of the crowd said, "Miss Lu, how can we let this person do as he pleases? Everyone, let's go." "Yes, let's go together," the 42 martial arts masters behind him said. The old man had white hair and a ruddy complexion. He had a round and pale face. He was plump and amiable. He said with a serious face, "Miss Lu, don't worry. The 12 public houses are united. We won't let anyone trample on the rules." Chapter 1392. They sent more than 10 people to heal the masters who were sitting on the ground. "Why don't I see anyone from the public house? Are they just hiding behind us and letting us fight for our lives?" scoffed the round-faced elder. Lu Yurong sighed faintly. "They're smart enough to hide in the High Duke's public house." "Damn it." The round-faced elder's face darkened. Fa Yuan secretly shook his head. He was not happy with Lu Yurong's methods. He slowly said, "Amit-ba, almsgiver Lu, the people from the public house retreated to the public house to defend themselves because they were afraid that Wei Wuwei would break into the public house. He's here for brother Chu Li. Wei Wuwei wants to kill Chu Li." The round-faced elder, Lu Qi, was surprised. "Yes," said Fa Yuan. "Ha ha." Wei Wuwei suddenly laughed out loud and coldly snorted, "I'm indeed here to kill Chu Li, but all of you insist on stopping me and suffering for him. Right now, he's heavily injured and his life is in danger. Why waste your energy?" He was very dissatisfied with the cold shoulder he received. He originally maintained the stalemate to wait for the two's secret skill to dissipate. When that time came, he would be at his mercy. However, he could not stand their contempt. If he did not show his power, they would think that he was easy to talk to. "Amit-ba." Fa Yuan suddenly realized and said, "Then all the more we have to stop you, almsgiver Wei." "Ridiculous." Wei Wuwei shook his head. "Wei Wuwei, this is not the Fu dynasty. It's not a place for you to act like a tyrant." Lu Qi shouted. Wei Wuwei's hands were still attacking the two. He turned to look at Lu Qi and shook his head. "Such arrogance. Not to mention this is the Ji dynasty, even if it's the Fu dynasty, who can stop me?" "That's not necessarily true," Lu Qi scoffed. Wei Wuwei suddenly disappeared from the spot and appeared behind Lu Qi in the next moment. He slapped him away. Bam 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 bam. He was like a wolf in a flock of sheep. His movements were extremely fast and in the blink of an eye, he slapped 4 people away. Lu Yurong and Fa Yuan hurriedly went forward to block him. Everyone was shocked and could not help but retreat. They saw the people who flew out spitting out arrows of blood and fell to the ground, unable to get up. They were angry and shocked, their hearts trembled. Lu Yurong shouted, "Everyone, let's go to the public house first." Lu Qi sat cross-legged on the ground, took out a jade bottle and swallowed a spirit pill, then said in a hoarse voice, "Miss Lu, we must kill him even if we have to risk our lives. We can't allow him to act presumptuously in our public house's territory." "Elder Lu," Lu Yurong snapped, "this is not the time to let your emotions affect your decisions. You should learn from Chu Li and preserve your strength. Grandmasters like them would not be able to stop Wei Wuwei at all. Fighting Wei Wuwei would be suicide, and she did not want them to die in vain. Once the High Duke's public house's strength was greatly damaged, the consequences would be unpredictable. Those martial arts sects that were suppressed would definitely take the opportunity to create chaos, and the entire Great Ji dynasty would be in chaos. Miss Liu. Fa Yuan shook his head and smiled bitterly. Brother Chu was forced to do so. It's understandable that he needs someone to protect him and heal him. Humph. Lu Yurong rolled her eyes at him and shouted, "Elder Lu, step back." Lu Qi shook his head. He looked amiable and easygoing, but he would not waver once he set his mind on something. Even if he had to die today, he would kill Wei Wuwei. Unfortunately, Wei Wuwei lived up to his reputation. He was truly terrifying. If they wanted to kill him, they would probably all die today. Even so, he would not turn back, because he had too much hatred for the Fu dynasty. "All right, I'll fulfill your wish." Wei Wuwei laughed out loud. His body suddenly disappeared and once again, he sent 6 grandmasters flying. After Lu Yurong and Fa Yuan caught up to him, they tangled with each other for more than 10 times. Once again, he used the same method and sent the remaining grandmasters flying. For a moment, none of the masters were left standing. The people who were watching the battle from afar showed anger and fear. This Wei Wuwei was too terrifying. No one could stop him. Chu Li squinted his eyes and looked up at the Buddha beads above his head. A force entered the void of his mind from between his eyebrows. He heard the sound of an old Buddha chanting. The voice was calm and peaceful, as if it was trying to convert him to Buddhism. Mahavairokkana's immobility scripture kept circulating as he chanted Mahavairokkana's immobility scripture to resist the raging Peng whose influence. The Buddhist power contained in the Buddha beads was really strange. While he was absorbing it, he was also shaken by it and changed his mind. He wanted to become a Buddhist disciple, convert to Buddhism, and ignore the affairs of the world. Everything in the world was like floating clouds and dust. It was all an illusion and a dream. Listening to the chanting of the Buddha beads, it was as if he had woken up from a dream and finally saw the world clearly. It was like dispelling the clouds and seeing the sky. From then on, he had the intention to leave the world and cultivate vigorously, but at the same time, he would have to abandon his family and friends. Chu Li resisted with Mahavairokkana's immobility scripture. He was still reluctant to leave the prosperous world and had not fully enjoyed himself. How could he enter a monastery to cultivate Buddhism? He did not want to completely cut off his mortal root. In the void of his mind, the 3 Buddhas and 1 demon were chanting. At the same time, the bright moon in the sky became brighter and more flawless. The bright moon became brighter and brighter until it illuminated the entire void. Gradually, it became so dazzling that one could not look at it directly. In the end, it was as if the moon had turned into the sun. The void of his mind was bright, and the 4 Buddhas and 1 demon were surrounded by tens of thousands of rays of light. Amitabha! Chu Li suddenly chanted the name of Buddha. His voice spread out like a bronze bell. The Buddha beads floating above his head suddenly lit up and then dimmed. The beads turned into powder and fell into the spirit soil, making it difficult to distinguish. Chu Li slowly opened his eyes. His gaze was gentle and his eyes were like jade. He did not look aggressive at all. There was only gentleness and restraint, calmness and depth. Shao Qi and the other 2 girls could not help but fall into his eyes. Ahem. Chu Li coughed softly and slowly got up. "Young master," Xue Ling called out in surprise. "Are you all right?" Chu Li smiled and nodded. He looked at Shao Qi and Shao Shi. "I've recovered. I knew you wouldn't die." Shao Shi smiled sweetly like a pearl. Shao Qi stared at him and pursed her red lips. Chu Li went forward and held Shao Qi's hand. He felt her trembling hand and smiled. "Don't worry, I'm very tough. I won't die so easily. How's the situation outside?" As he spoke, he examined himself and felt strange. After he absorbed the power of the Buddha beads, other than feeling that the world was clearer and closer to him, there were no other changes. His cultivation level did not change, the life and death scripture did not seem to advance, and the earth matrix and reincarnation scripture and other scriptures did not strengthen. This power was really strange. He checked the omniscient mirror again. It was still 100 miles away and did not expand its range. Based on what he saw in the void of his mind, the omniscient mirror should have been strengthened. He guessed that the range should have expanded to 200 miles. However, it did not expand and was still 100 miles away. It was really strange. What's wrong? Shao-Chi could see that he was absent-minded. Chu Li smiled and shook his head. He looked at Shao-Chi and the omniscient mirror was still operating. When it shone on her, he suddenly realized something. He could not help but smile. Let's go and take a look outside the city. Are you really okay? Shao-Chi grabbed his wrist and probed. Her fingers were instantly flicked away. The surging inner energy was endless and she could not see it. She rolled her eyes at Chu Li and scoffed. Seems like there's no problem. Chapter 1393. It was dusk outside Chongming Town. Wei Wuwei was awe-inspiring. His attacks forced Lu Yurong and Fa Yuan to retreat step by step. Haha, the martial arts world of the Ji dynasty is just SOSO. Other than Chu Li, there are no other masters. Wei Wuwei shook his head and laughed. Fall! He shouted. His eyes suddenly shot out a red light. His palm struck Lu Yurong and Fa Yuan's chests at lightning speed. Bang! Bang! Lu Yurong and Fa Yuan were both sent flying. They spat out a mouthful of blood in the air, and staggered a few steps after they landed on the ground. Lu Yurong's blood dyed her white veil red. She slowly took it off and threw it away, revealing her beautiful face. The people watching from afar started to talk about it. They were full of praise and pity. When they saw the previous situation, they already knew that this was the inevitable outcome. Lu Yurong and Fa Yuan, the two top-notch masters, were still no match for Wei Wuwei. This was probably the difference between the martial arts world of the Ji dynasty and the martial arts world of the Fu dynasty. Lu Yurong's jade-like face was as red as a drunkard's. She was beautiful and enchanting, but it was an abnormal, captivating red. She was already severely injured and could no longer fight. The blood jade palm's palm energy was still wreaking havoc, and her injuries were worsening. Fa Yuan's face was flickering with golden light, flickering and flickering. He was also fighting against the blood jade palm's palm energy. Ha ha! Wei Wuwei laughed loudly and said in a clear voice, Is there anyone who is unconvinced? His gaze swept across the crowd in the distance, and looked at the dozens of people sitting on the ground. He shook his head and laughed. Just SOSO, just SOSO. You really disappoint me. Young sect master has come from afar. How can I disappoint young sect master? A chuckle was heard from within Chongming Town. Chu Li's white robe fluttered in the wind as he slowly floated out of Chongming Town. In the blink of an eye, he had arrived in front of them. It's Chu Li. Chief Chu. Chief Chu. He actually appeared. The people in the distance gasped in surprise. They did not expect Chu Li to appear here. Chu Li's white robe fluttered as he stood in the night breeze. He looked at Wei Wuwei, who was 10 meters away. How dare you, young bishop? He looked at Lu Yurong and Fa Yuan and nodded. Thank you for your hard work. He suddenly appeared behind them and patted their backs before returning to his original position. Everyone only felt their vision blur for a moment before everything returned to normal. It was as if Chu Li had not moved at all. Lu Yurong and Fa Yuan heaved a long sigh of relief. His originally solid and domineering inner energy was swept away. Instantly, his vital energy flowed smoothly, and his inner energy gushed out endlessly, healing the injuries of his internal organs and preventing them from worsening. They had mixed feelings as they stared at Chu Li with bright eyes. He did not expect Chu Li's cultivation to have reached such a level. They were no longer on the same level. Chu Li. Wei Wuwei narrowed his eyes and scanned Chu Li. His eyes were bright as he scanned Chu Li from top to bottom. His brows furrowed even more. Chu Li smiled and said, "Young cult leader, aren't you afraid of dying here? You really didn't die." Wei Wuwei said coldly. Chu Li smiled. "I've disappointed you, young bishop. Don't worry. Since you're not dead, I'll let you die." Wei Wuwei disappeared in a flash and appeared behind Chu Li in the next moment. Chu Li focused and felt that everything had slowed down. He placed his hand on the hilt of his sword, unsheathed it, and lightly stabbed. Wei Wuwei became transparent in his eyes. His gaze pierced through the bloody mist, and he could clearly see the meridians and internal energy flow of Wei Wuwei. He could clearly see the flaws in Wei Wuwei's moves, and he could clearly see the flaws in Wei Wuwei's moves and blood circulation. The tip of the sword broke through the obstruction of the bloody fog and pierced right through. It pierced through Wei Wuwei's body without any hindrance and went through his back. Wei Wuwei looked at Chu Li in shock. The two of them were very close. He did not expect a sword to pierce through his body, and it was Chu Li who did it. In the next moment, he reacted and slapped Chu Li with his palm. Chu Li pulled out his sword and retreated. At the same time, he met the attack with his left hand. Bam! The two of them took a step back at the same time. Chu Li's earth matrix and reincarnation scripture dissolved the blood jade palm energy. He completely understood the mystery of absorbing the power of the Buddha bead. His soul energy suddenly strengthened. The omniscient mirror's observation range did not expand, but the intensity of observation increased greatly. He could already see through Shao Qi's mind and Wei Wuwei's mind. Even the inner energy flow in Wei Wuwei's body was clearly displayed in front of him. Wei Wuwei's treasured clothing was not the key point. The key point was that the bloody garment divine power was an extremely strong protective force that could counteract the inner energy on Chu Li's sword. Thus, it could not break the treasured clothing. The reason why Chu Li was able to succeed with his sword just now was because he had exploited the weakness of the bloody garment divine power. Thus, he was able to break the treasured clothing and injure Wei Wuwei. You! Wei Wuwei squinted his eyes. He felt that Chu Li was different. His cultivation level did not change, but he became more dangerous. His instincts were reminding him to leave and stay as far away from Chu Li as possible. He tapped his chest twice and the blood stopped flowing. The bloody garment divine power's control over the vital energy in the body was amazing. Everyone's eyes widened in disbelief. They looked at Chu Li, Lu Yurong, Fa Yuan, and then at Wei Wuwei. They could not believe this scene. They clearly saw how powerful Wei Wuwei was. They thought that the Ji dynasty would be humiliated again and be humiliated by Wei Wuwei. Chu Li was severely injured by Wei Wuwei before, so he escaped to recover. The protectors of the public house also did not dare to come out. They did not expect Chu Li to succeed in stabbing Wei Wuwei with his sword. Chu Li gently shook his sword and the blood rolled into the dust. The modesty sword's gray blade was not stained by the blood. He pointed his sword at Wei Wuwei. Your master is not here. Leave your life here. I will send your head back to the Church of the Divine Blood. He stabbed with his sword as he finished speaking. Wei Wuwei sneered and struck with his palm. Ding! Like a jade plate, Chu Li's sword was knocked away. Wei Wuwei did not seem to be injured at all. He approached Chu Li again and struck with his palm toward Chu Li's chest. Chi! Chu Li suddenly took a step forward and stabbed with his wrist. The sword pierced through Wei Wuwei's waist from the left, the tip of the sword emerging from the right abdomen. Everyone felt that in front of Chu Li, Wei Wuwei was like a different person. He was clumsy, slow, and defenseless. It was as if he was a different person from the Wei Wuwei who struck Lu Yurong and Fa Yuan like lightning. Lu Yurong and Fa Yuan's faces were solemn as they shook their heads. They knew that they would not be able to defend against Chu Li's swordsmanship. They might not even last one move. It was truly terrifying. Chu Li pulled out his sword and retreated. He shook his head. Wei Wuwei, you are no match for me. Good. Good. Wei Wuwei sealed the wound on his waist. His face was solemn. As expected of Chu Li. I can't not be serious. A purple aura flashed across his face. His eyes shot out a red glow and suddenly became blurry. He appeared 100 meters away in an instant. He was using the blood escape technique. Chu Li appeared one step earlier and stabbed Wei Wuwei's heart. His sword seemed to be waiting there, waiting for Wei Wuwei to appear and touch him. Wei Wuwei really collided with the swordsmanship. He was stabbed in the heart. Chu Li pulled out his sword and said, although the martial arts world of the Great Ji dynasty is weak, it is not that weak. Young bishop, you have underestimated us. Blood gushed out like a fountain. He took a step to the side to avoid it. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.